Hello and welcome back to your fourth favorite Malazan read-through podcast. My name is Duck.
Hello, it's me, Werb, and I gotta say, if y'all thought I was going to be annoying about how much I liked Krupp last time, Lynn might just, leave the call halfway through.
Hi, I'm Lynn, and I'm leaving the call right now.
No, you're not. You're trapped here.
Oh,
But,
yay.
we are also joined by our good friend.
I'm Eve, and I have nothing funny to say. My brain is tired from work. But I'll
Well,
be revived by my love of Lorne in about 5 minutes, because somebody has to care about Lorne on this podcast.
that's true,
I
because
think the majority cares about Lorne on this podcast.
am I the only
Yeah,
one who isn't Lorne pilled?
yeah.
I'm halfway there. I'm halfway
Alright.
there.
Well, I reread, I skimmed through the second half of the book yesterday and took notes, not like actually rereading it, but like reminding myself what scenes existed so I would remember that we have those scenes to talk about. And I specifically looked at Lauren stuff again to make sure I understand exactly how I feel about her, because I know with Eve here, I am going to have to defend, my Lauren criticisms.
Oh, you just hate women. It's okay. You can say it.
I resent this accusation. Anyway,
Well, you better have some good arguments.
fun fact, this is probably going to go up not too long after the first episode of this podcast came up, but it has been like 2 months since we recorded that, and I just didn't post it for a while for reasons, but it's been a while because I was slow at getting through this book because a lot of life got in the way, but that is not because there was anything wrong with this book. This was a great book, and I should also say, we are talking about chapter 11 through the end of the book. And besides that, oh yeah, we should probably let everyone know again. So, as I said, I'm Werb. I have read Gardens of the Moon, and that's it.
I'm Duck. I have read all 10 books, and I'm currently, all 10 of the main series. I'm currently reading Night of Knives by Ian C. Elsamont.
My name is Lynn, and I'm currently reading. I read the part one with the dude of the book. With
House of Chains is
House
what
of
the book
Chains.
is called. Yes.
Yes.
The book with the dude.
Yeah. Because, I mean, Gardens of the Moon does not have the dude.
Or does it,
I don't know.
Rafa? You'll see.
Rafa.
We'll find out.
Anyway,
And I'm Eve, and I've read the first five, so through Midnight Tides, and I'm reading Night of Knives right now as well.
which is a controversial reading order, but I support getting spicy with it. But anyway, I guess let's just talk about the book. I finished it a few days ago. I have sat on it a while, and I have decided I think it is a great fantasy book, a strong 8 out of 10, which was a little better than, Duck, you had set expectations for me, so I'm pretty excited to get to the books after this.
Yeah, with my history with this book is that I read it pretty soon after I got into fantasy. And then I got like 25% of the way into Dead House Gates, and then I took a break from the series, and then I came back and I reread Gardens of the Moon later. Even on a reread after finishing the series, my opinion is pretty much the same, which is that I really like it. It's a good book, but it's not going to get anywhere near my favorites lists.
Yeah, I mean,
And
me neither. I think I like what the book does. Like, in terms of, how much I would like the best version of the book, so just, purely judging by its goals, this might have some of my favorite goals of anything I've read, but I have just read books that were done better.
yeah, and for me, on a reread, see, it does get a reread bonus in the sense that a lot more things make sense, and you see how things are getting set up. But there is also frustration because you know that a lot of this stuff is going to be done a lot better later on.
Mhm.
And so there's a give and take there. And for me, it sort of landed at the same score, even if I did sort of understand it better.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just, as much as I think this could be executed better, it's also really impressive how well it was executed, because I think so many authors could take what this book did. They could take this idea of, we have an empire trying to conquer a city-state, but we're going to tell this story through a ton of different perspectives, some of which are looking at the big picture, some of which are not, and we're not going to have, one clear plot thread, but just show a billion little things intersecting with each other until you eventually see just how things play out at the end. I think a lot of authors would not even know how to approach doing that and might not even want to do that. And, this could be done better. Like, I think, prose, characters, all of that is good, but could be stronger. But it's also like, it successfully lived up to that premise of this sort of chaotic look at history and conquering and change. The fact that this was done well at all really impresses me. Like, I think one angle to it is that a lot of authors would write similar, and they would try to have that same effect of, like, there's so many characters, it's a complex political narrative that you have to keep track of, and all of that, except, it would be through the perspective of a single main character, or, a single protagonistic group, and then the huge variety of characters would all kind of be relative to how the core characters, interact with them. It would have a clear separation between main characters and secondary characters, and there are characters who are more important than others in Gardens of the Moon, obviously, but it doesn't really have main characters, and that is, a more impressive thing than it might sound on the surface, because it's not just subtracting out main characters, it's making sure that everything is interesting without having to be a main character.
Yeah, and I think that kind of helps the trap that some multiple POV books fall into, where there's like one that really sucks, or like, you get to a certain character's chapter and you're like, oh god, not them again. Because in Malazan, there's just such a big variety that, like, even if there are characters that you don't vibe with, it's going to be like such a small percentage of the story being told through their eyes, for the most part. Obviously there are exceptions, but I think it's a little bit easier to get into, even if you only have like a couple characters or plot lines that you really latch onto.
Yeah. And that reminds me, unrelated to Malazan, I've been thinking in general about some other stories with really slow pacing, because I think an effect of slow pacing is how it makes you react to characters you don't like. Because if a fast-paced story has a really unlikable character, it's like, ooh, they're unlikable, that's fun, that's spicy, you're enjoying the negative energy. And if a slow-paced story has an unlikable character, it could feel like you just have to be in the room with that character. It can feel like having to deal with that person in real life because you're in their presence narratively for so long that you just get so annoyed by them. And Malazan kind of can't fall into that problem because characters aren't really there to sort of be people you spend time with so much as there to play into a larger whole regardless of whether you like them or dislike them. I forget, it might have been you, Eve, it might have been Duck, but one of you told me something, maybe in the last podcast, but about how there's not really a wrong way to take a Malazan character. You can like them or hate them, and everything still works.
I think that was Duck, and I think it was a good point, because they're all so interesting and have such, like, specific roles in the narrative. Like, they're not just there to be a character or, like, to have a conversation with another person. They're there for a thematic, specific reason. And so I think even if you don't like them, I don't like Paran that much. By the way, I've decided Paran is my pronunciation because I'm getting too into Wheel of Time and confusing myself.
Speaking of pronunciation, I am going to say Krupp correctly now.
Nice.
Good.
Anyway, I don't like Paran that much. I kind of find him whiny and annoying, but I like reading about him because I see the place that he has in the narrative, and I'm interested in where it goes, even though, like, I don't really like him as a guy and don't really want to hang out with him.
I think one of the things that was weak for me about the first half of Gardens of the Moon was that I could tell it was going for that kind of thing with Paran. I guess I'll say Paran too. Like, it was clearly going for that, but I think just, like, what it was showing me, what it was giving me, just felt like it wasn't quite pulling it off. Like, there was so much skipping ahead and time skipping multiple years at a time, twice in a row with Paran early in the book, that it was like, it just wasn't quite landing, where it's like, I want to be like, I dislike this guy, but he's interesting, but I wasn't that interested in his narrative because it was weird. But with Paran, and with the second half of the book in general, I think almost all of, like, the narrative weirdness to the structure and everything was, just executed better. Like, it feels to me like halfway through the book, Erickson already, like, improved a lot at writing.
I will
Yep.
say that the Paran thing confused me structurally, because like when I was reading it, I was like, okay, so like we have our prologue, things happen, we have our main POV, and he's like, he's like a generic soldier dude on a mission. He has some family conflicts. We spend some time with him. I'm like, okay, this is the main character. And then like you continue reading, like you read past like the part where like they all start going to Darujistan, and like Paran's POVs become kind of unimportant.
Yeah.
And you're just like, wait, what happened to the main character? I thought he was the main character.
Which I do think...
When is Paran gonna do something?
Which I do
You
think...
just don't have the Malazan grind set.
Yeah,
you know,
'cause
you have to go into it and be like, this book is built different.
Yeah.
Like, you can't expect. I mean, you can, but it's
Yeah,
going to be
I mean,
disappointing. And like, that's the issue I had. Was I didn't think it was going to be as like, I don't really want to say experimental because I don't think that's the right word, but just like,
extreme.
you know, it's extreme. That is the
like not like extreme like skateboarding and and like hot sauce. Like extreme, like it pushes its concept to an extreme.
Yeah.
I also think, we were gonna, in the structure of this podcast, get into themes pretty quickly, and I think, to me, arguably the main theme of this book is that there are no main characters.
Yeah, I think
I think a lot of stories try to do that, where they're like, yeah, there's no main characters, and they have like 2 point of views, and it's like, well, like objectively speaking, like in your story there are main characters, so that can feel a bit incongruous.
Yeah.
But here it's like, yeah, there are no main characters, and here are the 40 people who you're gonna follow on this story.
Is it really like 40?
I think there's around 40 point of views in this one.
Wow.
Some of them are pretty just one-offs, but yeah, and then from that it's like, not only do you have 40 point of views, but the narrative itself is set up in a way where you get to see all of those point of views play off of each other.
Yeah.
And so from there, it's like, okay, I really buy that this story is going full throttle with this, because the structure is aligned with it, character choices are aligned with it, and it's telling me in that narrative.
Yeah.
Gardens of the Moon has 33 POVs, by the way.
33.
Oh. Still a lot. That is not. I am not like, oh, only 33. No. That's plenty.
Yeah.
But I do think that Paran sort of making you expect him to be the main character and then turning out to not be is definitely like a deliberate effect. And I think we talked about that last time, or if it wasn't last time, it was in an unrecorded call. But, that's definitely a deliberate effect. I think there is enough weirdness in the structure of the early parts of the book that it's not clear that you're supposed to realize this. Like, it's not like there is a moment where it's like, oh, wow, here, like, the guy we thought was our main character is not, well, he does die. I mean, I guess him dying is that point, but that's coming after already, like, a time skip to him, getting recruited by Lauren, and then another time skip that's years later, him on this mission, and it's just, there are enough, like, confounding factors to the pacing early on that I do think that, like, there isn't like Paran is not the real main character moment that I think there should be. Because I don't think, like, a lot of things in Malazan, I think should not be clear. I think it is a series you have to think about, and not a series that necessarily has to tip its hand. But I think narratively, it should sort of, when you read a scene, assuming that you sort of understand how to read Malazan, that scene should correctly communicate to you what the narrative purpose of the scene itself is, even if there are many things about the scene or within the scene that aren't clear. And that's something that I think the early book struggled with a little, that the later parts of the book did not.
And another thing is that, sort of analogous to the idea that there is no main character, is that everyone is the main character when the narrative is on them.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's something...
Like, it's harder than it sounds to actually make everyone the main character in their own mind.
Yes, I agree.
Because you actually do have to show how people think differently, and you actually have to, like, understand what priorities a different kind of people would have. Because when you're trying to write and you sort of have a plot in mind, it is very easy to think not about what the character would naturally think in their situation, and instead think what gets them along this plot that I want to happen. And like, even you can do this subconsciously, you can absolutely do this without realizing it, and I think it takes a lot of skill or at least experience with trying this to avoid that.
I think there's some specific examples we can get into. So I know we want to talk about Lauren because she's one of like the main cruxes of the story.
But I think also we have a lot of themes. We have plenty to get through before we do some specific character discussions.
Yeah, but just like as an example for this theme, like the way that Lauren dies is that someone who's not really involved in the story, who's been like tangentially mentioned, just kind of like shows up in the middle of this chaos and is like, "Hey, I'm gonna fight you," and she's like, "Okay, I can probably take this guy," and then she loses, and then that's how she dies. And so I think that's a really good end for Lauren as a character based on what she represents in the story and where she's going, but also reinforces this idea of like, yeah, sometimes you just run into someone stronger than you who's not in this narrative, you get your ass beat, and then you're dead.
Yeah.
And I think that establishes a lot of tension going forward in the series, where it's like that kind of chaos can just kind of seep in and ruin things.
Like, there are a lot of stories that try to have this effect. Like, there are a lot of stories that literally open up by being like, here's the main character, they're dead, and I'm not gonna name names. Attack on Titan! But I think stories try to have this effect, but by the very nature of the fact that they frame things as main characters and then make the narrative decision to kill them off, that's still placing weight on sort of those roles in a way that doesn't happen if you just actually commit to writing 33 points of view.
Yeah, I think it kind of gives it... I feel like it makes the characters feel a little more expendable, too. There are some books where, like, you know that the main character just isn't going to die, because it's like, oh, there's still so many more books. And, like, I know that they're one of the main, focal points of the series. But, like, if Perron died at the end of this book, or, like, at the end of book 2 or book 3, I'd be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean,
could you imagine the story of Perron died? That'd be wild.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, I mean, also because death is complicated in Malazan.
Death is not death in Malazan.
I mean,
just because a character dies does not mean that they're done.
Look,
show me somebody in Malazan who just died and that was the end.
Look, I have gone through a whole thing of like, wow, I didn't actually think Lauren was a character that would die here, but I guess it does make sense narratively. I guess she's dead. I am also bracing myself for there is a possibility she just comes back later through whatever, and maybe a terrible time for her. I don't know. It could happen. I mean, Lucine
when you were talking last time about Lauren being like, yeah, I bet she's really good in book 3, I was like,
Well, I was also thinking like, well, maybe
and she still could be in
look,
book
I was thinking maybe that's why you like her so much, because I wasn't seeing it just from what I had read. And now I'm like, well, no, I think we just have a difference in opinion on the parts that we've both read.
We just like women. Like that.
Yeah, you're just underestimating Eve's ability to really like female characters with little.
Well, listen. When there's 3 and one of them is actually a man because he's possessing somebody, then you got Tattersail who fucking dies. What am I supposed to do? I'm gonna latch onto Lauren.
Also, Apsalar becomes a character later.
And Apsalar's great. Apsalar's one of the best characters in the book.
I agree completely. I love Apsalar. I'm just saying, when Apsalar is not Apsalar from a lot of the books.
Apsalar better when she was possessed.
That's
because you like Cotillion. They're different characters.
I think there was a certain possessed swag to Apsalar.
Oh my god!
That she had when she was possessed. That she lacked when she became unpossessed.
Okay, so I just want to say, after I finished the book, I was like, oh, he's called the Rope because he, binds and controls people like a rope. Name is because his power.
The Rope because he garrots people.
And then also...
You're all wrong. So one of the epigraphs states that, every time he kills somebody, he notches another knot on her.
Okay,
rope.
but I like my idea better.
I thought it was because he
that's also
garrot,
it's
and
thematic.
Garrots people.
And so I also see that then a few days later, that one I got after I finished the book.
Thick.
I want to say, a few days after that, then I'm like, oh, they're called the Bridge Burners, and bridges are being burned between them and the Malazan Empire.
That was a really funny message to get.
Yeah, that also is part.
I mean, I got it on my own, I didn't have to have it pointed out to me. It was just after the book.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I really like about Malazan is that it can have these like thematic resonances that don't feel like, oh, like they make sense in world. Like, oh yeah, Cotillions called the rope, and then like you get it at some point, and you're like, oh okay, that's really clever. But it's not like he was called like, Lord Stabby McStab or something. And you're like, okay, there's really only one interpretation of this.
Yeah.
So do we want to talk about another thing?
Well, no, I have a few things. I actually have a couple structural things I want to get through, and then I really want to get into the themes. Because the first thing I want to talk about, which is like possibly the main reason I really like this book, is it is just easily one of the stronger, like, here's a billion little plot lines, and here's them gradually weaving together into this one big climax, and now we just see how it all falls apart. It is, like, an excellent, excellent case of that. It was really, really fun for me to follow that, and I'm almost, like, lacking things to say about how well it was done, because there's no, like, weaknesses. Well, there's things about it, but it was just a correctly done thing, almost like, it didn't do anything unexpected in how it did this, so much as it did the thing that I usually expect and am disappointed by in other books.
Yeah, Erickson really commits to the bit here.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the strongest things about the book, even as someone who didn't like it as much as you did, even though I still liked it, is that there just aren't a lot of stories that just come together like this.
And a lot of them try to, but I think
Yeah.
a lot of them, they create an impression of a ton of little plot lines, and then when you break it down, you're like, it's not as many as I thought. There were only like 3 real players, or like a lot of those things didn't end up mattering, and you're sort of hyped up in the moment, and then you think back on it, and you're like, actually, that wasn't that interesting. And I'm not having that issue with Gardens of the Moon.
And I think with this ties into the theme, but it's also a structural strength. Going into book 7, whatever it's called, I think it might be the Fet, like the last three or four chapters of the book, any outcome is on the table.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're not sitting there like, oh, but for the story to work, the Malazan Empire has to win, or because otherwise all these characters become irrelevant.
Yeah.
Or, oh, Darujhistan has to win, or otherwise, like, it genuinely feels like it could be the Malazans win, it could be
I think we talked about that last time. I think when we were talking about my predictions for the book, it was just like, well, any of these things could happen, but I do think that this happening the way it did says something thematically, not even about this book, but about how the rest of the series will feel, because it sets a very different tone if this book says, like, and here's the inexorable, flow of empire, and they were always doomed, versus, things work out, and, like, something, a great city gets to preserve itself. Those set very different tones, and that doesn't mean that, like, one is pro-empire and one is anti-empire. A version of Gardens of the Moon that ended with the Malazans taking Darujhistan could just be the start of a series that is about, the Empire succeeding most of the time, but then in the end we defeat them. And even the way it ended, which is positive, could also then lead into, things going very wrong in some of the other books. But I do think, it makes it feel different. It makes it, if one thing it tells us, this is a world that is somewhat dark. This is a world with a lot of problems and a lot of suffering, but this is not a narrative that wants to tell us, hey, look at how dark the world is. This is a narrative that wants to tell us things can work out. And sort of, even if things don't work out in, like, the next 5 books, it says something that they could work out here.
Yeah, I think little about Malazan feels inevitable.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why the series has a reputation that it does is that a lot of books will throw things in at the beginning that are going to turn out a certain way.
Yeah.
Like, okay, these two characters are going to get together, or they're not.
This guy is going to, free himself. This guy is going to, like, sort of do something interacting with the villain. There's no necessarily... Like, the book literally says Animander Rake is going to fight Raced, and then he doesn't.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
that's the sort of
it's
spirit
really-
of the series as a whole.
It's really hard to guess anything, which I at first found a little frustrating. Not that I'm good at guessing normally, so I don't really know why this was a hang-up for me, because I'm always terrible at predicting things, but sometimes I get into the spirit of it. I think it was was it House of Chains that I had like a super long prediction list, and I think like one thing off of it actually happened. Like I spent like a long time on this list, and I was like, this is probably all wrong, and then it was.
So I just
and
need
it's fun.
I think I know you well enough to try and think of the opposite things you would think of, and then I'll be right about everything except for one.
Yeah, sure. That sounds right.
But yeah.
I feel like on the topic of Animator Rake, like I do like how the I want to say drow because that's what they are. Like how the glorified drow with trade names filed off. I like how they were integrated into the book, because like usually like it feels like when you have like elves and like or like long-lived magical races, it's just like they feel like humans with a hat.
Yeah.
Or they're like so like disconnected and like far removed from like the actual politicking and nitty-gritty. But I feel like Erickson did a really good job of balancing it out, where it feels like these are like a unique ethnic group, like they're like their own people with their own traditions. But like they're also like involved in the world around them. And like how long they live like plays a big role in how they interact with these people, but they do just feel like people who have these unique traditions who live for a long time.
Yeah. I think one of the more compelling moments of reflection in the book was just when Animander Rake is like, yeah, I'm just trying to find anything my people will give a shit about because they are struggling. Which, that's why you like them so much, Lynn, because they're depressed.
It makes sense. Trying to find a...
They're all envy pilled.
No,
they have no zest.
Elves.
No zest for life found among the Tistiandi.
I like dark elves. Also, like I really like the Lorne Tool conversation, where it was just like Lorne was just realizing like, oh damn, these people are old.
Yeah, that one's really compelling. Ooh,
yeah, and then, I think the way that Malazan deals with immortality is super interesting. Yeah. Like, I just think it's done very well in a very like non-glorified way. Like a lot of the time when we see immortals, it's like they've had so long to get really good at everything and they're so cool. And these ones, it's like, yeah, they're really good at a lot of things, but also they're like all suicidal.
Yeah, and I something I like. Well, one thing I want to say is I really like how like everything with the Jagut, Jagati, everything with them and the Talanamas is like, yeah, Pizza Hut. Everything with the Pizza Hut orcs and the Talanamas is like, it just feels so old. It feels, I mean, like the Talanamas are like Neanderthals. It feels like such before humanity, alien to us in a way that even like other races aren't. But then at the same time, it's like, yeah, the Taistandi were just also around while they were doing their thing. And it has this weird feeling of like, you don't even know how to take it. Like reading Animander Rake and Raced talk is like, do they talk? Or is it more just like sort of indirect interaction? But either way, it's like as a human reading this, I lack the perspective to get how they would feel about each other because they are just both like so old and looking at from not human perspectives, and I'm expecting them to sort of exist relative to my own humanity and my era, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that Erickson does really well.
Like my thing is that like I feel like when like Tool is like talking to like Lorne, like it really does just feel like someone like dug up a Neanderthal skeleton, like gave it depression, and was like, all right, buddy, let's you and me have a chat.
Yeah.
Like,
but the thing is, it doesn't even feel like, I mean, it's kind of depression. There's sort of the conversation about like how much is depression a thing in your head and how much is it just like a natural result of your circumstances. And the way the Talanamas, or at least, you know, Tool acts is like, it's not like he has a problem with depression. It's just, how else could he be when he is still here so far beyond his era, just like trying to, or like, not even like trying, just like interacting with this world because he's gotta.
Well, I think another issue with Tool is like that he's so isolated from his people, because at least if you're around other people who are old as balls and like have the same shared history, I feel like it's a little different. But like Tool trying to talk to Lorne, it's like talking to like a bug, you know? Like she just can't understand anything. And I mean, that's kind of like the reader also. Like some of those scenes that you're reading, there's a notable pair of characters later that I had this issue with where it wasn't always an issue because I do find it very interesting, but it's like I genuinely cannot parse what you are saying because you've been around for too long and there's too much like history and just there's too much like informing your worldview that I just don't have. And I know that's an issue that some people have even with like the bridge burners in this book of like they have this shared history that we just don't get access to, but it's done like so much more with the Talani Mass and the Jagat and the Tisti Andi that I think it's one of Erickson's strengths.
And then
but
the book
it is sometimes
does
frustrating.
In the end, the book also does tell us things about the Pizza Hut orcs and the Talana Mass, and it much more than it tells us about the bridge burners.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the thing is, like, I'm very mythology pilled, and I'm also very anthropology pilled, I guess, and so's Erickson. And, like, one of my favorite Malazan things is that, like, okay, like, the Talana Mass, like, were not, like, objectively a sophisticated civilization. Like, they had, like, stone tools. They, like, you know, like, ran around, hunted things, died of, like, dysentery, whatever. But, like, because,
again,
like,
you like them so much, because they're dying of dysentery.
No, it's, like, because they're, like, you know, they're old as balls, and, like, they have, like, all this history, and, like, we're seeing it from this perspective. There's kind of a grandeur to, like, what's going on, even despite how, like, simple and, like, objectively not very grand it is. So, like, we see, like, okay, yeah, like, these are, like, Neanderthals. Like, these are, like, you know, like, Stone Age, like, hominids. But at the same time, they're given a kind of, like, majesty and power that, like, seeps through to the present day. And, like, I just really like the contrast between that, because it's almost like we're getting to see, like, we're getting to, like, be in the head of, like, a Stone Age Neanderthal who's like, yeah, like, you know, like, my, like, stone knife, my flint knife that I made is, like, fantastic. It's, like, the best thing ever. And, like, there's a shaman who's gonna, like, you know, like, bless me and it'll make me the strongest dude ever. And it'll, like, conquer the whole world, which is from, like, that tree to the other tree. Like, it just, like, puts us, like, in that, like, headspace. And it makes it, like, important. And I just really like that.
So I'm gonna go on a tangent, and then I want to just to get off all these tangents, because there are still more things I had to say about the end of the book, but we were just talking about, you know, Neanderthals and stuff. But so, I am not very anthropology pilled, but I want to become more anthropology pilled. I'm hoping to get around to, like, reading, like, an actual book about, you know, the basics of it or something soon. Because around when I was starting this book, but independent from this book, I literally, like, went down a rabbit hole of suddenly just finding it super interesting how, like, yeah, there were periods of time where, like, humans were on one part of the earth, and Neanderthals and even some, you know, other similar things were on other parts of the earth, and they were just both around. And something about that, like, you know, 200 million years ago, that just being the case, just, like, got into my head and feels so evocative to me, because I normally do not like fantasy races. Well, I like original fantasy races that are handled similarly to how, like, an alien would be handled, you know, if it's a believable alien. I do not like default elves, dwarves, orcs, etc. I just feel like they're archetypes that are usually tied to cliches in a way that feels both, like, weird as a way to, like, treat other sentient things, and also just, like, not conducive to characterization. And obviously many stories, you know, do them right. They can be written well, but, like, my preference is against those. Like, to me, if we're going to write about, like, something that's analogous to, like, racial issues, I would rather see racial issues written about than have elves and dwarves and orcs be these weird kind of stand-ins for racial groups. And that's just a me thing. But even though I normally feel that way, I started reading about, you know, how Neanderthals and humans were just around at the same time, and I was like, whoa, that's just so compelling that, like, it feels out of a fantasy novel that they were just, like, different races that were, you know, both humanoid, both had, you know, 4 limbs and all of that and eyes, but were just different species around at the same time. That's so compelling. And anyway, I was talking about this, and I was talking to Duck about it, and Duck was like, you are literally reading Gardens of the Moon right now. Part of what Erickson is doing with the series is just, hey, what if the Neanderthals were still around? And I was like, holy shit, you're right. That is so cool.
I feel like the way Malazan is, like, obviously there's like racism in like Malazan world, but like he's less focused on like, you know, like these people are racist against these people and that's bad, and more on like these are like, you know, the differences, both like magical differences and like cultural differences between like two groups of people. Here's how they interact and how they intersect and how that like affects their worldview.
Yeah. Which
Yeah,
is
and it's also
an interesting
less
way
like
to do it.
And it's also less like there's one dominant race and then like one very subjugated race. Like it's a lot more like, okay, these people have beef with these people and these people have beef with these people, which I think is an interesting way to do
which
it.
I will say, like, there's only a little of that in Gardens of the Moon. Like, I don't even like have a view yet of what the dominant races are in this world yet, but I think it is present a believable amount without being the focus of this book.
Dude, there's a race
like a lot of
like,
random people who ride horses.
that is true. Erickson really likes his horse warriors.
What was it that the Moranth ride? Because don't they fly around?
They ride
bugs.
I thought it was bugs. That's really cool. Anyway, wanted to get back to a couple things I had to say about the end of the book, as that was what we were supposed to do before then talking about themes.
Okay.
But
let's go on 7 more tangents during those 2 points.
So one small thing that does tie into a theme but is sort of its own thing is that I like how, in spite of so many plot lines coming together, a lot of characters don't have like the big thing they were meant to do. Because I think a lot of stories try to do the intersecting plot lines thing, and then they try to make it so everyone has like their ultimate moment where like only they could have done it and they, you know, saved the day or part of the day through their agency. And to be honest, I do really like stories that do that, but I also appreciate how in Gardens of the Moon, a lot of characters have more of just like a small part to play. Like Krupp just like pulling Raced into the dream and being like, yeah, no, we're, you know, you're not doing this.
You misunderstand.
You're not
Krupp
doing
had
this.
the largest part to play.
No, I'm saying Krupp had the largest. No, Krupp. I have no issue with Krupp's part, but then it's also like
the largest part to play because he's the largest.
Yes, and we love him for it. But look, Krupp is great, but it's sort of like he's doing this and he's like, we got you, Raced, and then it's like, shit, Raced just got out and is causing trouble, and it's like Krupp did his part. Krupp had an effect, but like he also just didn't like close the deal. He didn't succeed, and it's like now it's just up to other characters to do stuff, and I thought that was really good.
I really appreciated Krupp pulling in Raced into his dream world and talking crap.
Yeah,
I think that's a really great.
Yeah, and honestly, we will have a Krupp discussion later, but you know, again, no more tangents for now. So here's the other big thing I wanted to say about it. I finished the book and I was like, that is a great ending. You know, I am very satisfied with it. I do not know why I have heard other people say they don't like the ending of this book. And I don't know whether it's a popular or unpopular opinion to like or dislike the ending of Gardens of the Moon. I just have heard some people say they disliked it, and I was like, why? Why do they? And I haven't asked those people. I don't know why, but I did think about it, and then I realized something that affected how I took the ending, because a lot of stuff happens at the end that was not set up and was not foreshadowed and doesn't even really feel earned, but just happens. Like, the ultimate thing that stops Raced is something called an Azath just shows up and is like, I am a house now, and I have dealt with this guy. And I read that, and I was like, cool, I am sure that this is going to be something that's really satisfying in retrospect. The more I learn about this, the more I read this series. And then a couple days later, I was like, oh, I was able to have that reaction because I have been hyped up so much on Malazan and what Steven Erikson does that I am just expecting those things to pay off. I have a level of trust because people whose tastes I trust have said a lot of great things about the series, and I think I'll like it, and so I'm not too worried about things being explained now. But if I was reading it without those expectations, or if I was just like picking it up when it first came out blind, and the ending was just like, and then some random things happened that you couldn't have predicted that saved the day, I would not really be happy. I would be like, what the hell is that? Why is this not, rewarding, the actions of the characters, or why was this not set up at all? Because it is honestly a really weird way to end the book that only works if you are already, like, gearing up to be along Ericsson's wild ride.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it, because
Yeah.
as somebody who did not like the end of Gardens, along with basically all of Gardens, I did not have trust or faith, and I was not feeling very generous when I finished the book. I'm also just not very ending pilled. Like, I just don't like a lot of endings. I don't know why. I just always have, like, not even expectations, but I think I do want things to be, like, cohesive at the end. And since I'm such a character reader, I want it to feel like the characters played a part in the ending and that it was relevant. And in the case of Gardens, I just really thought that it wasn't. Like, to me, it just felt like Erickson was just throwing a bunch of stuff at us that he had never talked about before. Like the Azath, which, by the way, absolutely shook by your pronunciation. I've heard Azath and Azath, but not
Azath.
Whatever the fuck you said.
Azath.
I liked it. I like it, but I was
I
like,
think
what
Azath-
are you
Oh, I'm
talking
into
about?
it. I just
It's
take
kind-
a minute
no,
to discuss.
It kind of bangs. I like it. But yeah, and then like Raced and the Tisty Andy, like being dragons and all that stuff.
Okay, well,
It just-
that was foreshadowed. I actually...
Yeah.
So I didn't notice this my first read. I just my eye happened to cross over this line when I was skimming the book yesterday to take notes. But there's the part in the book where they're just talking about, like, ooh, what could be coming, and then Cole. Before Cole is even a character,
I
Cole
think
just
this is
shouts.
the first thing that he said.
He just like everything he's done in this book before now is be drunk and asleep. He just shouts, 5 black dragons.
And yeah, there's
Yeah.
Black Dragons at the end.
Okay, I will say, like, I also didn't like the ending. Well, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. And that was just because I had no idea what was going on after a point. Like, by the time, like, I had to read, like, the like, part where, like, the Azath becomes a house, like, 6 times. Because I was like, why is there a house there?
Well, it's like the
Like-
Dead House, which I don't know what that is, other than that it's in the Malazan capital.
Hey, you got that right.
I mean, it
And-
says it.
True.
Yeah, like, no, I was like,
Because Quick Ben is like, this is like the Dead House, right?
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, confused and furious. And also, I kept reading Piran's POVs expecting him to do something, and then he didn't do anything.
Well, he does. He helps the
That's
Azath.
my issue. My issue is that a lot of the characters, it feels like they're not doing anything. They're just standing
What
there.
did Piran
Like,
do?
oh
I
my
think
god,
Well,
look at all
he
these
just-
big things
I mean,
happening.
I guess I like
he
that.
just
That
met up with those like 2 guys, and they were like, "Wow, let's just like kind of dick around and like like grab some binoculars."
See,
I-
if you're
I just-
expecting Piran to have like a main character moment, yeah, that doesn't happen in this book.
Yeah,
but
But
he
he
does
also-
do something
if
that
he-
makes sense for where he is in the story.
I mean, he literally helps the Azath form.
I think my issue is that the
Which-
actions the characters take don't feel like end of book actions.
Well, yeah, I mean,
they just
to
feel
be-
like
yeah.
random actions.
To be
like
clear,
normal actions, which
that's
is
sort of-
fine.
Yeah,
Like, I
that's-
see what he's cooking now, but it's not a satisfying ending for me
Yeah.
because I was expecting an ending.
Yeah.
And to me, it didn't feel like it. It felt like he went, okay, here's 4 things you've never heard of. Okay, end of book.
Yeah, and to me, it's kind of like I mean, that's kind of the thing I was saying was good about it, that, like, not everyone gets this moment, and I was in a state of mind going into this series and this ending to appreciate that. But yeah, normally I do expect, like, characters to do things, and I don't know, it worked for me. It felt realistic that, like, when all these problems are happening, characters are going to be there and characters are going to think about it, but not everyone is going to have some, like, narratively contrived thing for them to contribute.
like I do like it. Like, well, I do like the general Malazan tone where it's like, this is not like the characters aren't like main characters of a story. Like the story is like the story you get out of a history book. It's like the story is the main character of the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I will
And,
say,
like-
I think Ganos' actual ending is when he picks up Lauren's body, and I think that's like
Talk
again,
to me about that.
Oh my god!
I'm
But
not over it.
I think that's the closure of his arc, because Lauren brought him into the story, and then he takes her out, right?
Yeah. And
Which is a great scene, and I think it's one of the better written ones in this book.
so I also want to jump into what Lynn just said, or jump off of what Lynn just said about, like, this is like reading history, because that is the first theme of the book that I'm
It's the
thinking
Book
about.
of the Fallen, baby.
I have in my mind 3 themes of the book that I want to talk about. And the first one of those, which is the one that I had noticed while reading the first half that I talked about last podcast, is that nobody is a main character and everyone sort of has their own thing going on. Everything is just looking at life and the events around them from their own perspective. And importantly, there is no larger narrative. Like, there is the larger narrative of, like, the, Malazan Empire is trying to conquer Darujistan, but that is things happening. That doesn't mean it is a narrative, specifically in the sense that, like, it is very easy to look at history as a narrative. It is very easy to look at it like the side that was our guys beat the side that was the other guys, and to look at it as, like, on some level, a conflict between 2 larger things. And I think the thing Gardens of the Moon is saying is that, well, yes, the Malazan Empire is trying to attack Darujistan. This is not really the Malazan Empire versus Darujistan. This is just a whole lot of people with a whole lot of little bits of their own agency doing their thing, and eventually, the dominoes all fall and something happens, but that thing wasn't caused by the Malazan Empire and Darujistan. That thing was caused by all of the little dominoes.
Yeah, and also I think it's important to note that, I mean, you said when you were talking about history, like, our guys versus their guys, and, like, in this book, there isn't really, like, an our guys, because we're on both sides of it as readers.
Well, Crocus
and so I don't
is our
think
guy.
that's Crocus is our guy, our
Crocus
little guy.
is our little guy.
He's not
He's
my
our little
guy.
lad.
He's
We
not
love
my
him.
guy. We do not support this.
But anyway, it's not like, oh man, I hope the Malazans win, Like, you're not getting to the end of the book and, like, picking sides. It's just like, goddamn, what's going on here? This kind of sucks. People are dying. And I don't want to say too much about my thoughts because they touch on the whole series that I've read so far, but obviously this is a theme that's going to continue coming up. And I think that getting to see not even just both sides, but, like, as many sides as we can of every conflict is very important to Erickson, and it's very important to, like, the way that the story is structured fundamentally.
I also think that it makes, like, when you set out that theme of, like, history itself is a narrative that has been imposed by someone, and that whoever imposes that
the people who win.
Well, no, it's the historian.
No, it's actually Croker.
It's
Real, it is Croker.
Yeah, Croker's writing this the entire time, guys.
That's a reference.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's a
We've
reference
never
to
left.
another series.
He's still in that cave. Anyway, so this is the fan fiction he sent the lady. Anyway.
Oh God.
But like, once you have that, you also see that played out with individual characters and individual characters' arcs, and how they narrativize their lives, and how there's certain events that you've been told about throughout the course of this book that you should look on with a lot of skepticism, because this is someone who's like, yeah, this is what happened. And then you hear conflicting information as you get other point of views, or you just sort of have to be intrinsically doubtful of what they're telling you. Like, we know that the Talana Mass, for example, have declared war on the Jaghut, and they don't like them, right?
And and I don't know if there's more to that, but it's really interesting because, like, they seem to have some resentment because Raced, enslaved them, but then it's like the Jaghut are also the ones who stopped Raced, so it's like, is this just... this very well could just be, wanting to eliminate any threat of this ever happening again. Could be that. Also could be more. I don't know.
I really like the line. I can't remember if it's in Raced's point of view, or he's like, because the Jaghut gave up society. That's their thing. So they
he talked about, like, holy crap, they literally did community just to stop me.
The only time was to come kick my butt because I was, like, torturing all of these Neanderthals or whatever. But it's a moment where you're like, yeah, okay, so the Jaghut as a race have their own internal history, but that history is not. It's not like, oh, the Jaghut gave on society, and then they never talk to each other ever again for any reason. It's like, no. There's situations where they would come together and do stuff as a collective.
It's just
like,
it's a lot of people who, like, live in their spot in the woods, and every few weeks we'll interact with a guy who lives in the next spot of the woods over, but it's, rarely more people in the same vicinity than that. But enough of them were like, that raced guy is kind of a dick to those Neanderthals. We should probably do something about it. But eventually the idea spreads around.
Because one of the themes that I see with this book, and I don't know if this is another one that you're going to bring up, and it ties into the history thing, is engendering uncertainty in the reader in terms of the actual things that are being presented to you. And I think this is another thing where people can kind of like fall off or not. And, there's unreliable narrators and stuff in fiction. But I like the way Gardens of the Moon does it is like, just by the fact that this is a story being told and that you have perspectives of characters in and of itself should make you uncertain about the information that's being presented to you. Because there are times where characters will think something and you're like, in a quote unquote normal fantasy book, that would just be like the take on that situation. But then you get another character's perspective and they're like, no, that's not what's happening at all. We're doing this for other reasons. And even in this book, there's sort of little things that are set up where none of the point of view characters have the necessary information to come to an actual conclusion. So they're all speculating. For example, like, why is Lysine doing what she's doing? Is it the right thing to do for the Empire? Is she really the one doing it? Like, what's going on from there? You see everyone's reactions to it. You see Whiskey Jack's take on it. You see Perrin's take on it. You see Lauren's take on it. But you don't have a definitive conclusion. You either have to cobble together some version for yourself, which is probably going to be flawed, or you have to wait until maybe the story gets to it and explains what's going on.
I really do like how like the characters are constructing their own history with like their own tropes, like the thing with Lysine, right? Like, is she this like, like cunning, like maybe like almost like seductress type like woman who like weaseled her way into power? Is she like hard-hearted and like pragmatic? Is she like what the Empire needs? Like, it's playing like on all these like different tropes where you could almost imagine like if you had like 5 different like biographers and they were writing like a biography of Lysine, they could each choose to present it in a certain way.
So I forget if we talked about this in the last podcast or if it was an unrecorded call, but something I really like about Lysine from like the very minimal picture of her we have is that she has this whole plan of like just get rid of the parts of the army that are loyal to the old emperor. And it feels like whether or not that will be looked upon or like defined as a genius decision to assert her power or like the biggest mistake ever made in running an empire just depends upon how it goes. And I don't know how it will go. It's kind of impossible to know. And maybe when it does go a certain way, we'll look back on that and think that was inevitable. But from where we are right now, I don't know if it's a good idea or not. And it really feels like whether or not it was like you want to be able to look at an idea like that, a plan, and be able to say something about whether in purely concept it's a good plan or not. But you kind of can't. Whether or not it's a good plan really does just depend upon whether or not it succeeds. There's no such thing as a good plan that didn't succeed, And then sort of like you said, like biographers could say that was her being a genius, or they could say that was her, totally mismanaging the empire even though it didn't bite her in the ass until 20 years later.
Meanwhile, the leaders of Darujistan are just terrible from the beginning. Well, at least the council, you're like, yeah, there's no historian is going to be like, yeah, they had it figured out with the whole sell themselves to the Malazan Empire.
Being a great part of history is up to who tells it. Being a terrible part of history is up to you.
I do think there's also some really funny moments to illustrate that. Like, I think it's Turban Orr looks at like the 8-foot tall Animander rake with like long silver hair and like this big ass sword and is like, yeah, who's this guy? It's like,
I could take him. I could take him.
He's like, I could take him. And it's like, okay, first of all, like, floating city above your city. Have you noticed it at all? But also, maybe don't antagonize the guy who's like twice your size and weight and has
don't
a big
antagonize
ass sword.
the guy who could just pick you up by the neck and drop you and you die.
Exactly. Like, what are you gonna do?
Also, wait, about this is not totally related, but it was hilarious to me how the subplot with the divorce guy just ended with everybody in question being like, well, maybe that was a little pointless and we shouldn't have done that.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. I want to get to that later because I want to talk about
Okay.
some bigger themes, but I do have thoughts on that.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree with you that it's a weird plot line. Not bad, but weird. Okay, so I have sort of three themes in mind. The first theme is the one I noticed last discussion that, like, there's no one narrative to history, everyone has their own story. And that one's like, you have to think a little to realize it, but it's also just like what the book is doing on the face of it. It is inherently the structure of the book. The second theme I have in mind is one the book just literally says in the prologue. And I want to talk about that in line with the third theme, which is connected to that, because the third theme is the one where I'm like, okay, I'm analyzing here, I'm cooking, I'm reading between the lines a little, I'm noticing patterns.
Yeah,
I'm not saying, I understand the book on the deepest level, but, I'm doing something here. So the second theme is don't get noticed, because that is a big thing. That is, Paran, was like, I'm going to get noticed, and then that goes terribly for him, and a lot of people, the danger they face, and, what kills them even, is that they got noticed. I mean, this one's maybe it's a stretch to say it's connected to the theme, but Lauren dies because she walked into the city, and Circlebreaker noticed her because he was like, that's the person I was told to watch for. Well, that one may be a stretch, because even though it's technically her being noticed, it's not, like, in the same sense of, like, getting noticed by people in power. Whatever. The theme that I really like is, it's sort of hard to put into words, but it is the arbitrariness of power, because there are many, many figures in this book who consider themselves powerful. Perhaps not all powerful, but they consider themselves powerful, and they think on some level that this puts them in a position of strength, that this puts them in a position of having control over their own stories, and they don't. And sometimes it is that they think they're the strongest, and then someone stronger beats them. Sometimes it's that they think they're the strongest, and then someone weaker beats them. Sometimes it is that they think that they're, in control of things, and then something unpredictable happens. But no matter what it is, I think the book is actively saying, like, if you think you're in power, like, you do have power, but that power will never be enough. And I don't want to go on, like, a huge list of every single examples, partially because my notes on that are disorganized, and partially because that would get boring after a point. But, like, for example, Lauren is, like, one of the most powerful people in the Empire. She is, like, one of the right-hand people of the literal Empress. She dies because a regular guy notices her, and then she doesn't even die because, like, yeah, she also meets, like, a really strong guy who's just better than her and beats her ass. But then she dies because two ordinary-ass people who happen to be spies just, shank her in an alleyway. And, like, there's obviously the themes of, like, the hierarchy of power going on in Darujistan, because everyone in the council thinks they're in power, and they're not, because, the Cabal is really powerful. But then you might think, like, okay, Baruch is really in charge. Baruch literally just would have died to Vorken. Like, Vorken was just stronger, so even if Vorken wasn't, actively taking part in the politics of the city, Vorken could have just killed, implicitly, like, could have taken control at any point, because she was just able to kill the people in charge. But then Vorken dies to an ordinary person, but then also to the whims of the gods. And then the gods, with the gods, that whole thing is, like, Raced is literally like, I'm going to enslave everyone, and Karul literally tells him, the tides of enslavement have reversed, like, mortals kill gods now, which is, like, if that doesn't tell you that power hierarchies are arbitrary and never absolute, I don't know what does. And then the final thing I want to say about that is that one of the most powerful people in the book, Krupp, the reason he is able to be as powerful as he is and not get screwed is because he is the only person in power who understands that he is better off not getting noticed.
Yeah, I largely agree. I think this gets illustrated again with Race, where I can't remember who says it, if it's Krupp or Cruel, but someone's like, yeah, like, when you were in power, the Neanderthals or the Talana Mass were just, like, whatever, weak. It wasn't anything. But you didn't deal with the first sword of the Talana Mass Empire. And then Tool shows up and, like, rams them through.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, this is an ever-shifting tide. And, like, right now, politically, the Malazan Empire is on top, right?
The Malazan Empire is like, yeah, we can deal with gods.
Yeah, like, well, we're going to manipulate a Jagut tyrant to our whims because we can just do that.
Yeah.
And not going to spoil the rest of the series. But it's not going to be that like the Malazan Empire just wins all the time.
Oh, of
and you even
course
see that
not.
at the end of this book, where
They
it's
don't
like
win here.
they have all of these military assets here, but because of random nonsense, it's just not enough.
Yeah,
to,
and
for
I
them to
really
achieve
like
this
how
win.
like the reason the Malazan Empire doesn't invade is like the reason the Malazan Empire doesn't invade is not like we win this ultimate battle or we beat their champion here, although, you know, Animander Rake does beat that dragon. But the reason the Malazan Empire doesn't take Darujistan is mostly just that their entire military campaign is just kind of falling apart.
Yep.
But yeah,
And they talk about like the arbitrariness of power. The army that's currently on Genebakus right now is being commanded by Dujek One Arm, and it's talked about early on in the beginning that army is more loyal to Dujek One Arm than the Empress because he's the one who's actually been running this campaign.
He's a good ass general
because he's a good general and he like is looking out for his soldiers. And so when you get to the end with the defection, correct, where they kind of go on their own way. Yeah, exactly. And like
I think it's I want to say that's a little weirdly handled, but it works because them defecting is not really like shown, but Dujek kind of just tells Whiskey Jack like, "Yep, we're ready to defect," and then it's like, well, yeah, it happened because it wasn't gonna not happen. Like, yes, this absolutely happens at the end of Gardens of the Moon. It doesn't even really need to be shown with like an explicit scene.
Yeah,
Dujek doesn't.
That's
need to,
the thing Malazan likes to do.
Like,
They like to just skip stuff.
Dujek doesn't
it's not
need.
like
we don't
they
need
were
to
gonna zoom the scene and
he
be
doesn't,
like, "Hey, sorry, Busty."
He's not like, you know,
differences.
He's not. We don't need
breakup text.
We don't need the scene of him taking a shit on Tayshren's desk.
No, he just unfollowed the Malazan Empire.
I need that
on
scene.
Instagram.
You know what? Yeah, we should have gotten that scene.
At this point, this is a tangent, but it's a super short one. Like, I fucking hate Taishiren, and at this point, I don't even remember why. Like, it's not even a bit at this point.
Name?
Like, it's not just because of the name. Although I just realized like yesterday that I was spelling it completely wrong because I texted Doug, and then I like checked the dramatis personae and I was like, fuck, I messed up. So I like edited my message and then I checked it again and I was like, fuck, I messed up again. Because I had spelled it wrong in 2 places. So
okay, wait, great. Okay, I'm going to, from memory.
But I fucking hate that man and I want to shit on his desk.
So,
and I don't even know why.
Okay, my experience reading this, like, Gardens of the Moon was like, I would read the name Taishiren and I would forget he existed. And then like 1 page later, it would be like, Taishiren. I'd be like, who's Taishiren?
I will say,
okay, so Lynn just has brain damage.
Yes, we already knew that.
Not really relevant.
Lobotomy win. It's working.
Lobotomy wins again.
Okay, but I do think like the book in general is not as its strongest during like the pale Taishiren stuff, and it is like.
Yeah.
He isn't really someone who pops off the page, in my opinion. His scenes don't really, like, showcase him that well. Like, I think Taishiren is more interesting in retrospect when you understand the Malazan military situation later on than he is when Tattersail is dealing with him. Because when Tattersail is dealing with him, you just have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I think, like, the stuff that happens with him and around him is interesting. But, like, he as a guy, like... I feel like he doesn't have that much of a personality, and we don't get much of a sense of, like, what his motivations are beyond just, like, his place in the army.
He's just loyal to Lucene.
Well, yeah. To think about, like, the arbitrariness of alliances, right?
Yeah.
Like, the group that leaves at the end of the book is Crocus, Absolar, Kalam, and Fiddler, and they're on a boat with Circle Breaker, if I remember that correctly.
Gotta say...
Crocus chucks the coin.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. Absolar was possessed by a god that was trying to fight the Malazan Empire. Kalam and Fiddler were for the Malazan Empire, but then they defected. Crocus was like Darugistan's like #1 son, and somehow they all end up on like a boat together, and that kind of makes
Crocus wasn't #1 anything.
Yeah, Crocus was
no. There was a period of time where he was definitely #1 simp.
It's true.
Okay, true. That's real. #1.
He grew out of it.
Cringe.
#1 cringe.
Did he?
Yeah, I don't think he did. I think he just
changed the target of his
transferred it. Yeah.
Listen, I am just so mad that Crocus did not live in an era where you could dono bomb girl streamers on Twitch, because he would have gone crazy with it.
I mean, what else is he doing with his thieving money?
I am so
Real.
mad that Crocus and Absolar got together. Like, when I was reading the cute scenes of them falling in love, I wanted to throw the book out a window.
Those scenes are great.
You're mean.
Yeah. You just hate love and happiness.
What color is your heart?
I can't even defend that.
Is your like literal human heart like rotted brown like a dried fruit?
Yeah, it's the scurvy.
The thing is, like, Crocus is like so self-evidently irritating. He's a well-written character, but he's so
I love that guy. I love
He's
that
a
guy.
little guy.
Reading about good things
teenage boy
causes me pain.
So, a couple other things that I just remembered I wanted to bring up relating to the whole, like, power theme is one of my favorite examples of that is Hairlock. And I have things to say about Hairlock, but one thing I really like about it is a lot of Hairlock's his motives in the book were him basically just trying to become more powerful. Like, when they got attacked by Gear, he was trying to, like, absorb Gear's soul to get stronger. And I really like how, like, you know, he's just fucking around, going through warrens and doing all that shit, and he's trying to become stronger and stronger. But in the end, he basically gets beaten because Quick Ben is just like, haha, I'm gonna cut your strings, you're done now. And I think that's another perfect example of, like, there is no power without a but. And Hairlock had a very explicit but. And the other thing that I find really interesting there is...
Unfortunately, not an explicit dick from what
that was a really bad way to phrase that, considering our last discussion.
So, Werb, I think another thing with that is it ties back into sort of the uncertainty idea, is that Hairlock was part of the Bridgeburners' plan to get back at the Empire. And very quickly they realized that this was a terrible plan, because Hairlock had basically gone insane. And so then they have to pivot, and then Quick Ben has to go onto this whole, like, honestly really cool, like, quest into the realm of Shadow, where he's, like, hiding himself, and he talks to Shadow Throne, and he, like, gets one over on him. That's, like, a really cool sequence.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, well, you try things, and they don't work out, and then you have to accept the fact that they haven't worked out, and then try something else.
Like, to me, Hairlock is an active reason the early parts of the book are so confusing that I really like in retrospect, because I spent a lot of the first half of the book just, like, keeping track of, like, here are what each faction's motives are, and I think a lot of why I was able to enjoy the second half so much is because I got that down in the first half. Mm-hmm. And Hairlock was the part that I was really struggling to understand until I understood that, like, his motive is literally just, fuck you, I'm Hairlock. And I think and the thing is that as much as that was funny, that was really confusing, because I was like, why did Quick Ben, like, work with him? Like, I understand that they wanted to use him to, like, you know, figure out if Taishran is trying to get them killed, but then still, like, you never see him doing that. He just immediately starts, you know, being all, fuck you, I'm Hairlock. And I think the single funniest moment in the book for me is when they talk to Dujek, and Dujek is like, yeah, so why did we get reports that a possessed puppet captured, tortured, and killed an Imperial Claw? And their Whiskey Jack and everyone's just like, we didn't know he did that. And it's just like, okay, so he literally did do the plan, and then he was just like, I'm not actually going to give you guys the information. I'm just going to start killing crows and trying to become stronger until you have to deal with me.
Yep.
But anyway, the other part of that power theme I want to bring up was that I do really like how, like, I think if there's one person Raced was beaten by, it's Opon. And it's very indirectly, and I don't even really know what Opon's motives are, but... And, you know, other people at Agency, like Krupp also, you know, had his own thing going on. Although Krupp, I feel like, Krupp didn't even know here so much as he just was very willing to go with the flow and play his role. But, like, Opon is the one who woke up Karul, and Karul is the one who, like, coordinated with Krupp and, you know, helped get things done, you know, was, like, helping deal with Tool and, like, understood, you know, the Warrens that were involved. Like, the thing that beats Raced is part of what's interesting is that, like, he gets called back to, like, an even older Warren than him because it's from Karul, and it's like Opon is the one who made all of that happen with, you know, luck and manipulating events. And he did it, you know, they did it not through being stronger than Raced, but just through, you know, making sure everything was in the right place at the right time. And from there, I also wanted to talk about like, I don't think I'm supposed to fully understand Opon's motive yet. I think part of the book alluded to, like, they kind of just wanted to, like, mess with things and see how things play out. It was something more specific than that, but I forget. But the thing that I wonder about Opon is really a comparison between Paran and Crocus, because they are both tools of a pawn who get some item of a pawn that is, inciting them to, influence events, and, they both have that thing of, like, get rid of it when your luck ends. And Paran, for him, this is hell. This is a lot of things going terribly for him. This is a bad time. And with Crocus, I mean, some things go poorly. I mean, his uncle dies, but
he got a girlfriend.
he's also
out of the
just
deal.
it doesn't feel like having the coin in his life was hell. It's just like a thing that happened. And I'm almost curious, like, I don't actually know what to make of that, and I want to ask you guys, like, what do you make of that? Do you think there is, like, a thematic or moral reason why, like, it was hell for one of them and not for the other to be a servant of a pawn temporarily?
I'm not sure Crocus even knows he is a servant of Opon. Like, I think he's just kind of dumb. And he was like, yeah, he's hanging out with this, this coin, and whatever happens, happens. I think he does know, but I just don't think he cares as much. Whereas Paran is, like, so 20-something agonizing over his life purpose that he's like, oh my god, like, and I mean, considering the way that I feel like the stakes for his story are just higher. Like, Crocus, his issue is like, oh, I'm in love with this girl, but I'm kind of dumb. And then Paran's issue is like, I got fucking murdered.
So
and I'm working for an empire.
So
I
I
don't necessarily think that the coin... Well, obviously the coin didn't do great things for Paran's life. But I don't think
you mean the
coin
sword,
really
or
made...
you mean Crocus?
No, sorry, the like, Opon's interactions didn't do great things for Paran's life. But I also don't think Paran's life was, like, made super bad by... Like, obviously, he did get stabbed, so there was that. But to me, it was just, like, he was just dealing with things that he would also otherwise have been dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was already in that situation where he was, like, a soldier in, like, a tough spot. His loyalties were kind of torn.
But the thing is, he got brought back to life because of his connection to Opon.
Yeah,
because, like, if he was just a guy, he would just died.
Yeah, but, like, the thing is, he just had, like, really quirky luck for a while, but he was still in the same situation that he was in.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
So I think there's I have two reactions to that. The first is that Crocus is just surrounded by better people than Perrin is.
True.
Like, Krupp, and then the Murillo, Cole, and Rallic Dom are all looking out for him. His uncle Mamet, like, Baruch not directly, but, like, kind of through the coin bearer. And so, like, there's a lot of infrastructure around him that is influencing things positively. And then I also think that this kind of gets into the push-pull dynamic, but, like, applications of randomness are random. Like, sometimes in your life, chance really helps you, and you get something that you shouldn't have gotten. Then other times it feels like you can't win for losing, and just everything is going wrong.
Yeah,
and so I think...
I don't know if this is the intended interpretation, but when they talk about, like, throw it away when your luck turns, I don't take that as, like, Opon's, blessing follows a pattern where at a certain point it will shift from good luck to bad luck. I take it as more of just, like, gambling. Like, the time to sort of stop gambling,
when you
in,
start
like,
losing.
literal real life gambling. Like, there's a point where, like, just, cut your losses, don't worry about it anymore. And then, like, when you take your first loss, do not keep trying to bet anymore if, like, to, make up for that loss. Because, like, I'm not saying it can't work out, it literally can, but it is just, like, it's not good for you to chase that.
And this ties into, like, the whole power thing, and, like, even, like, Kroll's talk about the relationship between, like, gods and mortals, where Perrin is a tool of Opon, but you also get the scene where he's in Dragnapur, and he calls down Opon, and Opon freaks the hell out, because he knows where he is. Yeah. And then, like, there's the whole thing, like, if the chain broken and frees the little doggies, and they go into the thing that's under the wagon. But it's like, yeah, if you're a god, then you can't just, like, randomly... You have to be careful, because if you put too much of yourself into mortals, that's a path for someone to pull you down. And I think that's an important precedent to set for the rest of the series, because it's kind of laid out in this book. the relationship between gods and their worshippers, or gods and the people that they influence, can get complicated. And it's not always like, all right, well, I'm a tool of a pawn. I have no recourse here. There's actually something that Perrin did that turned the tides a little bit.
Glad to get some discussion on that. Is there anything else thematic we wanted to talk about? Because I think we're getting close to be able to move to characters.
So I do want to quickly mention that, because we had mentioned before the plan to get revenge on Cole's wife, or ex-wife,
Oh, yeah.
and how that doesn't go the way that they want. Well, actually,
I mean, it kind
maybe
of
is
does.
the only plan in the maybe
No,
it
it
is like the only
succeeds.
plan in the book. Yeah, so I want to be more clear here. It's the only plan in the book that I can remember that just straight up is successful. Like whatever they set out to do, they ended up doing it. It all worked out perfectly. And then they're all sitting around at the end like, wait, this is not.
Yeah.
This
and
does not feel like what
see,
we thought it was going to feel like.
To
And
me,
so I think
I feel like the book didn't necessarily spend enough time on...
that I agree with.
I don't think it spent enough
it's
time to
actually-
really say, like, yeah, this revenge felt pointless. But it is sort of like... I think it's okay for that to be, like, kind of an open question that then, even if, like, Murillo and Rallick are just no longer in the focus in Memories of Ice, because I could see their story being done. Although then again, Rallick was doing stuff with the new house. So maybe he still keeps being important. But
Rallick, he ends up in the new house, right?
yeah,
He
he
takes
takes
address
Vorken in to sort of, keep her alive, which is weird. Like, Vorken was not, like... I do like how, like, Vorken is not a character you see until she acts, but it is kind of like, like, this character, like, that we never really got to know, just, like, is now, keeping her alive. Like, she is the one who, like, this very important magic house cares about helping keep alive. That's weird. But, yeah, and so I think it's fine for, like, this question of how revenge feels to be open, but it is just... It's odd because it's just such a straightforward plotline in the middle of some very non-straightforward things going on. Like, they win the duel, and it's like, yeah, we did it, and then it's like, yeah, we tell Lady Simtal she done fucked up and she probably kills herself, and it's like, wow, like...
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if it's almost more to make the reader reflect on how they feel about it rather than show the characters reflecting on it that much, which I do like.
I also
do think for that plan, it kind of feels like it's a bit of a Shaggy Dog story, because while I was reading the book, I was thinking, okay, like, they're gonna have a plan that's gonna intersect with all the other plans going on, and it just ends up being this, like, side plot, and it kind of feels like they're kind of meh about it at the end, we're kind of meh about it at the end. It's an interesting diversion, but reading it for me, I did feel kind of cheated, because I thought they were gonna do something, like, important.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't mind it mostly just because I think it brings interesting things out of every character involved. I like how Rallick, sort of, you get to see he has this really strong sense of justice and, like, how he needs it to work out there. I like sort of what we get with Cole kind of reflecting on it, and, like, Cole's whole conversation with Paran is really good, and how he's like, yeah, I wish I had my power back. I mean, it sucks that I lost my power, that I was actually that vulnerable, ties into the theme, but he also wants it back. He doesn't mind sort of how that got him noticed, while Paran kind of regrets getting noticed. And I like, I think just the duel between Rallick and Turbinor is a great scene. I really like how Animander Rake is just like, man, I think you're so annoying, Turbinor, that I'm gonna be this guy's second. And I really like how Turbinor is like, ooh, what's the best political move I can make? Ooh, I'm gonna call out this other big noble to be my second. And then Astrasian de Arl is just like, this is stupid, and I am not going to get revenge if he dies. And Turbinor is immediately like, fuck this guy, fuck, I gotta do something to get him back after this.
And
Part
he
was
never gets
so
the
good.
chance because he gets morted.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I'm not
Because
saying
he's
it's
going
not
against Animander, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a weird plotline. I agree it is. Because, like, I don't think the book is trying to be a, like, and hell yeah, the nasty, slutty woman who betrayed her man got punished and killed herself. I do not think it is that kind of narrative. But it is very similar to that narrative. It is, it is done similarly to how that narrative would. It's just that the context around it makes it different.
I don't think that plotline is, like, about her, but I don't know what it is about. Like, it's kind of lost on me, to be honest, like why that whole thing is even there, because
Yes.
I mean, it does flesh out some of those like secondary Darujistan characters, but
And it adds character to how Darujistan politics are.
yeah, I guess that's true. That's a good point.
But yeah, I
I also
definitely
think it's
like.
important. I think it's important to show that like, so the Malazan Empire is going to invade Kurdistan, right? Like the entire continent is like getting conquered, and the people in Kurdistan are still just on their normal crap with their normal petty problems. And of course, they don't stop and be like, "We have to unite against the Malazan," because that's not how it works, right? And so, yeah, you would have this political nonsense and this, very personal gripe that is taking place in the middle of this like epic fantasy plot because that's what those characters care about. And you have a character like Crocus who is very short-sighted and cares about very specific things who gets pulled into the larger fantasy plot. That just doesn't happen for, the Drudistan 3, except for the fact that they know Krupp, and then Krupp is the eel, and there's that whole, he's dealing with race or whatever. But it's very tangential, or it's like very closely related to the thing that if you were going to write a history of Drudistan, you would actually write about, which is the failed Malazan invasion. But it's like this side story sort of thing that popped up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could see a version of the book that would be better if it integrated with more, but, like, it's not a flaw with the book, but, like, it's an 8 out of 10 book, not a 10 out of 10 book.
Do we want to move on to characters now?
Yeah, so, I think we discussed some of an order we want to go in that's mostly arbitrary, and we're probably going to bounce around for most of this, but why don't we start with the one we kind of, alluded to talking about already, and discuss Lorne. And if, I don't know, Eve, Lynn, do you want to open up with that?
I love Lorne. I think she is one of the best characters in the book. Like, I unironically love her. And I am genuinely very sad that she died. And I wish Paran had died instead.
I mean, I'm not against Paran dying, if we want to go back to my whole vendetta.
I mean,
are
he already did.
Are we really just going to play the hits again? Like, come on, Steve.
Okay.
The original.
Anyway, yeah.
I also love Lorne. I find her very relatable as a woman who is apparently in her 20s. She seems like she'd be older, but she isn't, and that's relatable. She's under a lot of stress all the time, and she's having a midlife crisis, and she does not figure her shit out, and then she fucking dies. And I just love her.
Relatable.
I will say
this is the kind of content we come here for. And I love, first of all, I should have said this at the beginning, hot woman with sword. That's also a point in her favor.
And it's a really good sword.
I don't think Lorne is like, it's a really cool sword.
It's not even a normal sword. It's like magic sword.
It's like the 15th coolest sword in Malazan, but like it's a really cool sword. But like I don't think that Lorne's appeal comes from like any character archetype. Like I think it just comes from the fact that she starts out, you're like, okay, we got this like military lady. She's cool, she's powerful, and then she, like, her entire worldview just like crumbles over the course of the book in a way that does not feel satisfying to the reader, because it doesn't feel like she's like unlearning like cultural prejudices or like, the empire brainwashing she grew up with and like improving as a person. She's just like, God fucking damn it, like what is the meaning of life? Like what am I doing here? What are any of us doing?
Yeah.
And then she dies in a meaningless kind of stupid way.
And I also like how, like, before she dies, she pulls herself back together and she's like, yeah, you know what? I am with this. I am going to do my duty. I'm going to do what I have to do. And then it doesn't work out.
Yeah, she's like, I'm going to commit to this. And then, nope. And I just love her.
Yeah. The thing with Lorne is that it feels like she just is like one of the most completely real people, like, in Gardens of the Moon. Like, I think all the characters in Gardens of the Moon are well written, but for a lot of them, it does feel like there's a certain arc that they're gonna follow, and there's certain tropes that they abide by. Whereas for Lorne, it just does feel like she is like someone who managed to claw herself up into like a position where she can feel confident, and then she has all that taken away from her, and she's like, shit, I'm really out of my depth, and then she dies.
I'm not sure I'd say that's a thing that's unique to her. Because to me, I feel like, I mean, what I'm going to kind of get into is that I feel like she is an extreme example, maybe like an extreme, but like an example of a thing that like Malazan is doing with almost all of its characters. But what I will say, for starters, one of the funniest moments in the book is when you get Paran thinking and like very seriously thinking about how he is upset that Tattersail died, and he's upset about everything he's been through, and the person he's going to blame for that is Lorne, and he has to kill her. And then you get Lord being like, yeah, it sucks that Paran guy died. He was hot. I really wish I got a chance to have sex with him at one point before he died.
Yes.
So the thing about Lorne is that to talk about Lorne, I have to talk about Quick Ben, because I think Quick Ben is the most emblematic.
This is not very feminist of you.
Quick Ben is the most like easily emblematic of how I think Malazan handles a lot of its characters, and that Quick Ben, as a person, has a lot going on. He, has this whole backstory, this whole relationship with Shadow Throne. For some reason, he, abandoned like, being in the temple, and he, now like, the Cotillion can kill him if he wants, but he's still messing with him and has taken those risks, and he has, for some reason he's in the Bridge Burners, and he's a super powerful mage who's just holding back, and it's like, okay, almost none of that matters to what he's doing in Gardens of the Moon. The only time we dip into that is him temporarily going to make a deal with Amana's Shadow Throne to deal with Hairlock, but like, the actual plotline Quick Ben has nothing to do with it. And that's not like, it's this sort of thing where there's books where there's an interesting character, but they don't have a plot. And there's books where there's a character who goes through an interesting plot, but they don't have enough character. And Malazan, what it likes to do is take people who have a lot of character and put them in plots that are barely related to those characters. And on like a conceptual level, I find that interesting because I think if you truly like asymptotically approach the ultimate version of character writing, then there is no such thing as a plot that doesn't connect to the character, because every character will react to any situation as they would and in a way that no one else would. But in terms of most plots that you can practically write, there are plots that bring out more from their characters than others, depending on which characters they're suited for. And I think that this is a strong aspect of Malazan. I am really rambling on about this, sorry, but I have more to say. But I think this is a strong aspect of Malazan because it makes it feel more realistic and more like you're just immersed in this world with a lot going on, because, doing characters whose plot lines are perfectly suited to bring out their character stuff, that is one of the things that makes a world feel more contrived and less natural. And all of that's cool, but I think for some characters, I just feel a disconnect where I'm like, you're probably an interesting person, but I would rather read the book that's actually about that. And I think Lauren is a character where I feel that disconnect. Because, yeah, like, the stressed woman who's very loyal to the Empire but struggling with, like, what is the line between herself and, her duty is really interesting. But I just read it, and, like, I get why you guys find it interesting. But when I read it, I'm just like, one thing that matters to me a lot is I like to see characters doing things. I'm not against characters more thinking about things, but I like when they do things. And like when Lorne is thinking about like, is she herself or is she, is she Lacine's adjunct? Is she herself or is she the adjunct? That's right. I don't feel like she's like, implicitly she is being faced with choices because at any point she could just say like, you know what, I'm not going to do my duty, I'm going to walk away. But I don't think the book really like presents her with a choice where you get to see her choose between those two sides. It's just a thing she thinks about. And the other thing is that like, I do really like her reflecting on the sense of perspective she gets when realizing how old this whole empire's conquering things is, how old that is, and how, like, the Talanamas had an empire, and the Jagut had an empire, and all of that was happening, and, like, just kind of rethinking her place in the Malazan Empire and what she's doing for it in that context. I think that's really good. But when she reflects on, there's a point where she's been reflecting on that, and then in her next POV, the book tells us, like, it feels like the divide between, her as a person and her as the adjunct is breaking down and all of that, and she's not sure about anything, and I'm like, I don't feel a good enough connection between her thoughts on that whole, like, empire and millions of years stuff and the whole thing she went through with Tattersail. I just don't feel like those ideas are connected, and I feel like for me to really like her kind of breakdown, I would have preferred for those things to be connected more.
I mean, I think that, at least for me, it's like, that it is just fairly relatable. Like, sometimes you will just be like, damn, we are living in a society, and like,
I mean, to be clear, like, I like that moment.
Yeah.
But to me, it's...
Yeah, like, but like, I think there's like moments where you're like that, and you're like, well, I still have to go like wash the dishes, like make dinner, and you just kind of like keep on doing what you're doing, but like you're more stressed about it now.
Yeah, I mean, I
think
like that.
Lauren captures that very well.
I feel like I would almost like it more if it just didn't have that kind of moment after she's been thinking about this stuff where it talks about like the sort of lines, the walls breaking down in her, because that feels to me like it's more connected to when she wanted to, you know, punish Tattersale, and then she had to put that aside as adjunct. And I think that is a great moment, and that is a moment that presented Lauren to like a choice, and she was forced to make the choice she had to make, and that says something about her character. And I feel like the moment where she's struggling with, you know, is she herself or is she, you know, the adjunct, should have been, you know, after that, not after the whole like Tilana Mass or millions of years old thing. And I'm not even saying it's unrealistic, because like realistically that would still be on her mind while then she's also dealing with, you know, the Tilana Mass stuff. And I can understand it on the level of like all of that is, it's more that like things are cascading and there's so much pressure on her mind that she's starting to break at that point. It would have been more interesting to me if there was like more of a thread between those two moments. And I assume listeners can tell from this whole ass rant that like Lauren was really like the part that I went out of my way to like think about and take notes on when I did a quick skim through the book to like prepare for this discussion.
See, normally I would say, yeah, but Whiskey Jack goes through the same thing, but I know you don't like Whiskey Jack either, so.
I mean, Lauren is not a character I dislike. I just like...
Lauren is also a better character than Whiskey Jack.
Yeah, I mean, outside of this podcast, I kind of like... We had a few small discussions. I was like, like I have pretty different opinions from some of you guys on Lauren, and like, while your opinions are very valid, I'm sort of curious why it didn't work for me. And like Whiskey Jack, like, no, it just... Sorry, I don't think he's done that well, and I don't think anyone here disagrees.
You might just not be like stressed woman in her 20s pilled enough for Lauren.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think on a certain level, if I can just read Crocus and immediately, before he's done much, just be like, this is my guy, I totally understand what being that kind of male teenager is like, then like, you guys can say that with Lauren.
And Crocus is one of the best characters in the book, because he's just a guy.
Yeah, can we talk about Crocus?
Well...
Oh no, we have a list. We have
a list.
It's okay. We can talk about Crocus. I will say that I am unnecessarily mean to him. I think he is a sweet little guy and a very well-written character. However, he makes me want to shoot myself.
You have to bully him. You could say, okay.
Look, this... I'm not going to get into that now because it's more of a personal thing. Like, I think the weird thing about Crocus to me is that I'm not entirely sure what his arc is. I mean, he definitely has the arc of sort of learning that his idealized love for Shalise was wrong, and that part is good. But I feel like a lot of his other stuff doesn't really relate to that, but I don't have a problem with it. I like that he's kind of just vibing and doing the things that he does, and there's not necessarily like a lesson for him to learn.
Yeah, I feel like he doesn't really mature that much over the course of the book. Like, he does a little bit with the Chalice, whatever the fuck. I don't know.
It's Chalice.
Stuff. Well, it has 2 L's.
No,
There's something going on there.
Chalicki.
Not to pull in an Erickson quote, but it's a reference to the Holy Grail. Chalice. Like, it's...
That is such an author thing to do.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. I like the plot.
Because she's his goal, but then also it's like associated with femininity as like a vessel.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that is clever.
Yeah.
That too, yeah. Okay, that is pretty good.
That's
yeah.
good. That's good.
All right.
All right. We'll give Erickson that one.
It is
what
really
I was
funny.
trying to say.
It's really funny when he shows up to Chalice and she's like, "Oh, is that you, completely other guy?"
It's so funny.
Yeah, he's held up this interaction in his head, and he gets there, and she's like totally involved with someone else.
But then also, she's not even like, she didn't betray him. She's like, yeah, you're cool, but he's not the guy she's into.
No.
say, like, I'm very pro Crocus now, okay? Having read half the series. But having read Gardens, did not like him, thought he was annoying and cringe. And
He is all
I
of
tend
those things.
he is. And I tend to not have, like, this is 100% just like my reader bias, but like am much more likely to latch on to a female character than a male one, especially if they have certain attributes. And there are some attributes that in guys I find extremely annoying that in female characters I find extremely compelling. And not to name names about a certain other Malazan character I may or may not have recently met, but there is a character who is cringe and kind of dumb and idealistic and female, and I love her. And Crocus did not hit for me in book one, but I think that he is a good character. I think that I don't ever want to talk to him at the Gardens of the Moon version of him, and he would very much annoy me in real life. But I love him now, and I feel very fond of him, like he's my stupid son.
Okay, so I do have to say, I don't know what my top one moment in the book is, because there's two in competition, and I'll get to the other one later, but one of the contenders is Crocus just showing up with a couple bricks and chucking those bricks at the head assassin, and it does the job.
Listen, sometimes creative problems call for creative solutions. And you just gotta chuck some bricks.
I
hope that it works.
I really do love the crude simplicity of that act that perfectly represents the fact that Crocus is the one doing it, and like the sort of just upon did not give him power, he upons both of them, but upon they just like put him, used luck to put him in the right place at the right time, and all that meant was throwing a couple bricks. And it's so, and there's also like a child, like throwing a brick to me feels like something a teenager does, not something an adult does. And I love that it's just like, it's like a little immature, a little kiddish, that just, it perfectly fits him.
I also have to say, Crocus and Absolar are really cute. I like how she just sort of like awakens. And
They're
like,
so cute.
Oh God, where was I? Oh, wait, there's a cute boy there. Okay, well, I'm good.
Oh, handsome boy. Okay, I guess I'm fine now.
I
love her. And then
I'll figure out
and then
what
he's
continent
like,
I'm on later.
She's like, what name should I use? And he's like, well, there's this super cool thief god, so don't use that name. And she's like, fuck you, I'm using that name. Which, first of all, Crocus, why would you bring it up if you were like, this is a shit name, don't choose it? Then don't tell her. But whatever.
So I will say,
the thief who stole the moon, by the way, and the title
I just
of the book
think
is Gardens of the Moon.
Gardens of the Moon.
I just think they're so cute, and also that scene where she talks about the Gardens on the Moon.
Love that scene. That is,
it's so good.
It is like a perfect title drop, a perfect, just like, this book is not about the Gardens of the Moon in any way, it's completely unimportant, but it also, in this book, with so much suffering and an impending war, like, it's so evocative to title the book after this peaceful land we yearn for.
Yeah, and it's just such like a childish dream that she has, like, even after she's been through so much stuff, like, just the way that it's written, she's so, like, wistful. She's like, won't it be so nice? Like, we'll all just be happy up there. And
so,
they're just kids.
Yeah.
I want to flip a table.
We talked about the parallels between Ganos and Crocus, but there's also parallels between Ganos and Absolar.
Because they're both tools.
Real.
They're both
That's
tools.
true.
But
both
the difference
kind of died, too.
Well, it happens. But the difference is that Absolar had the seer woman who just came in clutch. And
yeah,
I mean,
she's the MVP.
Like you said, Crocus was surrounded by many better people than Paran, and because Paran, he chose to leave the life he had into this, and that's why he had no one. Whereas, Absolar was also okay because she had someone protecting her.
Yep. And then she also comes out of it, and she has this group of friends, and she has this community, and she has this guy that she's interested in, and so she's doing a lot better than Paran, who tried to find solace in Tattersail, and then she it kind of explodes.
I will say,
she turned into a baby.
Obviously,
traumatizing.
The main sort of coming.
That was one of the weirdest plot lines in the book.
Okay, before we get to that, there's more we have to say because I want to talk about Absolar. The main sort of coming together of plot lines is obviously the ending, but I do love how it comes together. That exactly when she's ready to go kill Crocus, Anamander Rake just grabs Amanas and is like, get the fuck out of here. And he's like, get your ropey guy out of here too. And Amanas is just like, fine, and then that just leaves Absalar there just to be like, yeah. And
Yeah.
I wonder if Apon had a hand in that, because Paran was there for like Rake's thing with Amanis. So you have to wonder if like Apon, was through Paran influencing, that specific outcome.
I think the reason, like, because I actually like Paran, despite my earlier statement about I would rather him die than Lorne. But I think the main difference between how Paran comes off and how Absalar and Crocus come off is that Paran is, this is probably because he's older, but there's just like more seriousness to him. Like he's cringe, but he earnestly thinks about everything that he's going through. Whereas with Crocus and Absalar, they feel very one-track mind, and like the only track they know is like horny. So it's just kind of like, yeah, like the world's on fire, but cute guy.
I love the
Paran,
vibe. The
yeah.
Like, we already talked about that scene where they talk about the Gardens of the Moon, but the vibe specifically in the context of how like there's so much tension of the city potentially falling apart, like, coming at the same time, and they're just vibing there above a dead body that Rallick dealt with, It's finding that beautiful simplicity in the midst of so much chaos.
Listen, when love hits you, love hits you. You don't
Yeah.
get to pick the time and place.
I will say,
Yeah.
so Absalar, like when I talk, like my S tier of characters in this book is Crocus, Krupp, and Absalar. Like Absalar is fantastic. She doesn't have much of an arc in this book, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But like a lot of what's interesting is that we knew the Fisher Girl, but we didn't really, and it's easy to assume that the Fisher Girl was just some timid, country girl. But then you see her as Absalar, and it's like, oh, she has a personality. Maybe some of it's from Cotillion and all, but like, she's actually a lot more feisty than you thought. Why did we assume she wasn't when we didn't know her? And I think that makes a lot of the scenes with her just fun to read. And then seeing her like deal with, the memories she doesn't have, which she eventually gets back, that is also like interesting. But there isn't really a conclusion to that. We don't really deal with it. We just have a promise that next time we see these characters, we're going to deal with it because we kind of have to if the reason they're going on that journey is for her sake. And I think that's another moment that's like an I went into this series knowing I should give Erikson my trust moment. Because if I was, just reading this when it first came out, I would just be like, Absalar's kind of cool, but we don't like do much with her. Instead, I'm like, oh no, this is just set up for her actual arc, and it's really interesting setup, so she's in my S tier.
That one is different because it doesn't feel like a missed opportunity. It feels like you
True.
said, like set up.
Yeah.
I think
Whereas,
it's pretty obviously. It's not like Erikson dropped the ball.
It's
like
more
he's saying he's going to be big later.
Yeah. And like I think the Azathoth, whatever, is also set up, but it is set up instead of a more typical climax that would be something that was foreshadowed, which is a much bigger ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the other S tier character, Krupp?
No, we have to talk about some others first.
Oh.
So, you know who we should address because it's sort of associated with one we already talked about? Tool. I really don't have much to say other than the fact that Tool is cool.
I agree. I think he's a great counterpoint to Lorne.
Yeah.
And I think he was a really good choice for that. I like his interactions with the Jaghut tyrant, brief as they are, but just him like ramming him through with the sword, like messing him up is really cool.
I think there's an ambiguity to Tool's character that I really like, because on one hand he's presented to us in a very heroic way, but on the other hand his like talk with Lorne is just straight up like, yeah, we did a bit of genocide. Like
they did a lot of genocide.
Like it's presented in a way where to us the reader it's not justifiable, but to the people he's talking to in his own worldview it's just like, yeah, we were just doing the right thing.
I mean, it sort of puts to question like how we interact with like the idea of like, do we judge, people that are different enough from us from like their standards? How do we judge something like genocide in that context? Because from what we can tell, wanting to genocide the Jaghut is literally like fundamental to the T'Lana Mass, and we know so little. We have so little perspective that like, do we just take that for granted as an acceptable? How can we take genocide as an acceptable, but how can we judge them for something so fundamental to them? And to be clear, if you had to ask me, if you had to make me give a stance, my stance is obviously genocide is bad and should not be done, but it's an interesting space to explore, especially because we lack the information. Like, we would need to fully understand why they want to do the genocide to then, like, get them to not do it, and we can't do that, and that makes us think and wonder what it could be.
I think the thing is that most stories that try to do cultural relativism are very labored about it.
Yeah.
There's always like this like angst where they're like, oh man, like they say this thing, but my heart says the other thing, and
Yeah,
like I was raised in like this society.
It's
But
not trying
when-
to tell us what to think,
Yeah.
it's just showing us the situation, which reminds me something I forgot to say ages ago, but is relevant at all. When we were talking about immortality, I think that a lot of stories try to engage with the idea, again, of those ideas of like, you're immortal and you get ennui, you get bored, and they don't literally do this, but they essentially do it by like, you meet an immortal character and they just start talking about like, the thing about being immortal that sucks is you get really bored and you lose people. And instead it's like, we just see these characters like Tool or like Animander Rake, and the way that the fact that they are dealing with that kind of immortality is just implicit behind the way that they are in the first place.
I would also like to state for the record, on the off chance that Stephen Erickson listens to this podcast, I did not say Malazan was purporting cultural relativism. Direct all your hate mail and comments to Lynn. We'll put her Gmail
I
in the
didn't say
description.
that.
We're saying it engages with the concept of it
No,
in a
I'm
very...
joking.
No.
Yeah.
It engages with the concept of it in a very mature way that invites you to think about it rather than tell you what to think about it.
Disclaimer, everybody in this call believes that genocide is a bad thing and should not be done.
Where's your
It's
cultural
always
relativism now?
it's always good to put the disclaimers 2 hours into the episode, just so everybody knows.
I will also say, Raced is fine. He's fine.
I
He's
like
a cool
him.
dude.
I like Raced in the context that Malazan does a really good job of getting a lot out of a little with his character. It really, I have been told that Erickson only gets better and better at this, but I think Raced is a very good case of, like, we just get his character from how he tells his own story.
Raced, I feel like, it's like how the Talana Masks are kind of like they're a shout out to the Neanderthals. Raced feels kind of like a shout out to like Gilgamesh or like Achilles or like Hercules, like all these larger than life, like heroic characters. Literally,
not heroic.
Like, well, heroic as in like
a great
Capital
figure.
H heroic.
epic hero,
great figure.
epic hero. Yeah, like someone like Achilles,
A
not
warrior-
necessarily a
a
good person,
A warrior king,
but yeah. Like he feels like a figure of myth and legend, and he just kind of like has that energy to him. Like he fully buys his own story too. Like Raced is like, yeah, people are singing songs about me. Like I'm like, the like main character of like 50 epic sagas. Like he just knows this, and like it's just he has that confidence.
One thing I really like about Raced is, well, not really like about Raced, but like I like how one of the main like fundamental plots of the book is that the Malazan plan to take out Darujistan is to use Raced to bait Animander Rake, and you only like figure out that this is happening like halfway through the book, and instead it's being slowly set up. And I don't know, I like that as a mode of plot progression, partially just because it's so different. Like so many authors are like certain that they have to, if not make it clear, at least allude to what the final conflict is early on. Like they have to set that up. They have to establish that is going to be a problem, even if it's not clear it's going to be the main problem. And this book just doesn't, and you don't need to. I think a lot of authors stick to that, not because they have to, but because they're scared not to. And the other thing, I like about it is also that it gives us that feeling that, we're digging into secrets. It was actually a Malazan secret plan, and it feels like a secret because it's not just told to us from the start.
And it's also like not a really good plan, I'm gonna be honest.
I mean, it's the kind of plan with a whole lot of ways it could go wrong. Like they're like, we'll be able to deal with him after he kills Rake, or deal with Rake after he kills Raced, and it's like, I mean, hope so. Hope so.
I mean, I feel like the thing is that like it's a plan that makes sense from the Malazan perspective, because it's like, how are we going to deal with this like immortal, larger than life epic hero? we get another immortal larger-than-life epic hero to fight him. They cancel out. Easy.
We can deal with our infestation by releasing a whole lot of that creature's predator, which will definitely not cause problems to our ecosystem.
This always works.
Basically, yeah.
No. Erickson has a good understanding of how Empire works. I will also say that I like Animander Rake. I think he's a really cool character. I don't leave this book going, I'm ready to buy Animander Rake footy pajamas.
Yeah.
I kind of did.
That's basically my take on him. Like, I have no issues with him. He's done well. I think especially as the book goes on, I'm sold on his whole... I think the thing that sells him on me is the thing I mentioned earlier, that it's not just a solo thing. It's not just like he's this troubled immortal. Is that he really wants his people to just, like, get a hobby, Like, he reads books because he has the time.
Start podcasting.
Yeah. And
they could start reading Malazan. It'll keep them busy for a while.
Yeah.
I think the cool
Might
thing
not cheer
about
them
Rake...
up, though.
I think the cool thing about Rake is when he, like, undercuts the expectations of, like, this giant badass. Like, when he, like, sits down with Baruch and, like, has an actual conversation about, like, what's going on and seems to be pretty respectful, you're like, oh, maybe...
Just hanging.
Maybe Rake is a guy you could bring home to your parents. He'd be respectful at dinner, inquire about their lives. He's not just, like, this meathead badass or this, like, super dark, edgy, broody. He's actually seems like a dude who just is in this position. I think that's the most interesting thing about him.
And I feel like Rake is like, he does kind of just get to be cool and win by the end of the book, but obviously we expect more in the future. But, like, I feel like Rake is an interesting example of, like, he's an immortal who just, like, did it right. Like, I'm not gonna, necessarily say I understand how much his worldview has been, investigated, and he did want the coin bearer to be killed because he didn't want to deal with a pawn, so I'm not saying he's perfect, but, like, in general cases, it's like, he is an immortal who's, like, a good person. He wants to protect a city that's being unfairly invaded. He might, make hard decisions like trying to kill someone that he think would just cause too much trouble, but, he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to be good. He's not like an immortal with some weird blue and orange morality. He's not an immortal who's like, I'm going to do whatever I want or be evil. He's trying to do things right. He's very strong. He is able to back that up. But we see, the thing is, we see the limitations of that. It doesn't feel like he's there in the book to be like this thing that everyone should aspire to that always saves the day. We get, like, even though it's not necessarily the main point of this book, I think we get a proper sense that, like, it's not, sunshine and daisies being Animander Rake.
I think, for me, the thing that drew me to Animander Rake is, first of all, I like elves. Second of all, I like dark elves. But also, I think there's something fascinating about the way Animander Rake was presented. Because I knew Animander Rake was going to be a character going into Malazan. But I was really surprised when he just shows up in, like, the pale sequences, and then when he just shows up in Darujhistan and, like, has tea with people.
Yeah, I don't think he shows up in the pale sequence. Well, I guess he's, like, implicitly like sending.
You see him.
He's doing some. He's sending out some magic.
Yeah. The thing is, though, is that I think it's a really fascinating way to portray elves and long-lived races in general, where Animander Rake is, like, as you said, he's trying to do the right thing. But for him, this is like, like the summer between high school and university. You, like, go on, like, a volunteerism thing to, like, Africa, and, like, you build, like, a schoolhouse. Like, maybe people will use, maybe people won't. Like, the important thing is you can put it on your resume. Like, I do think he's, like, intellectually, he's trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But there's kind of a callousness to him that really shows through. Like, he's very, when he's just like, yeah, like, I might, like, kill these dudes and, like, condemn them to an eternity of, like, pulling a cart. Or I might not. It's your choice.
Listen, Animander Rake is a job creator, okay? Equal opportunity.
Yeah, the local economy. Yeah,
exactly.
Localized inside his sword.
Yeah, exactly.
A stable job, you never get laid off.
Housing.
You got housing.
Like a stable job in the sense that it's what horses should be doing.
You get to be killed by Animander Rake, which a lot of people on Tumblr would sign up for in a heartbeat. Like, come on.
Yeah, what's not to like? You get to hang out with some cute doggies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
like
great.
Conus, who, like, you know.
Yeah, get a
Love
good
that guy.
workout in.
for Anamana Rake, this is just he's trying to do the right thing, but he's not really like intellectually he might be serious about it, but emotionally he's not serious about
Yeah.
it. And like there is kind of this
But
like
he's also not whining
Yeah.
about it, you know, like it's
Yeah.
just implicit that he has that struggle in his head.
yeah.
Like, Animander Rake has seen 100 Darujastans get conquered by 100 empires. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Like
just
it's
the way
not
that it is.
it's not a question for him, but it's also like he can't force himself to feel the things he might have once before.
Like for Anamana Rake, you get the sense that like if you because he's on the side of Dujistan, he will kill you if you had to try to betray Dujistan to the Malazans. But if like Dujistan does get conquered by the Malazans and you all die, he'll be like, well, that didn't go great, and then he'll like take a nap and like come back in 100 years, and he'll be like, okay, new day, new me, let's get started.
Yeah. And one of the bits I really like is he does just explicitly say he's doing this for his people more than he is for Darujistan.
Yeah.
Like he's doing this because he's hoping that by bringing his people in the vicinity of an opportunity to do right instead of wrong or nothing, they will be inspired to do right. And like in that, he does see the value of doing right, of course, but it's also like it's more nuanced than that. Like it's more interesting. It's not just like I am, you know, the great big cool guy who always, you know, keeps doing right things.
He's an influencer.
Look, if Animander Rake told people on Instagram to buy, you know, his skincare routine, you know,
People would do it.
Yeah,
he'd be
they
a
would-
billionaire.
Okay, we're talking about Krupp now. Fuck all these other characters.
No,
Okay, I should go to bed now. I should go to
we have to talk about Tattersail before
Okay.
Lynn goes to bed. Is there anything to say about Tattersail? She literally the only
She's a
thing
baby. What
the
else?
only
she
thing
turned into a
hated
baby.
that
look, the
sequence.
only thing that happens to her, like that sequence was, you know, in the section of
Trippy.
the book for last podcast. The only thing that happens to her in this sequence, I think, is Paran's, you know, getting, you know, almost captured by a bunch of what were the Rivi, and then he
Yeah.
sees Tattersail. Oh yeah, I do like that moment. It's a good like Opon moment where it's like, like he just lucks out, and then they're like, well, yeah, that, you know, that means that we should spare you. But then he just sees her for a moment, and it's just like, well, he's never gonna see her again, at least in this book.
Tattersail, I think there's really good payoff in book 3, but like after reading book 1 and reading Tattersail's ending, I was so mad
Yeah, I mean, this
because
is
it just kind of felt like either you commit to the bit and you kill the character or you don't, you know, like don't make them a magic baby.
So I do think the sequence of her getting reborn is really cool. I understand being discomforted by it. I just think it feels like a really magical and mysterious sequence. But at any rate,
Also, you've got Krupp and Cruel and
Yeah. Pranchol,
Franchel Doncaster.
yeah, you know, just fun time. But
Dream blunt rotation. Am I right?
Like I
Yeah.
don't think that like I think the sequence is very well written. I think it hit all the right beats. I don't love it conceptually just because I mean things like I don't have an issue like generally speaking with like magic babies and magic pregnancies, but in this case it felt like it was very like it just felt like Erickson needed to get from point A to point B, and point B is in like book 3. And in this case, it just felt kind of like because we don't even know who the Revi are at this point, and they just show up and they're just gonna have a magic baby.
yeah, I mean,
It wasn't sold to me very well, I guess, in like how it happened, and especially because I felt like there was a lot of foreshadowing that Tattersail was going to be the one to die, and not like Lorne. So I didn't love that part of Gardens of the Moon, but I do think the payoff in Memories of Ice is really good.
yeah, I mean, this is 100% a like I have trust in Erickson moment, and like
Yeah.
I don't expect most people to go into this book, you know, ready to trust Erickson, because why would you? My circumstance of hearing as much positive about it as I have, and like being excited for this kind of thing is very much like a rare thing. But yeah, I do think what I like about this is how it makes you yearn. Like, you as a reader and Paran both just want to get more Tattersail. It feels wrong that Tattersail isn't a continued part of this book's narrative. Like, you want to see her, and I find that feeling compelling. it's definitely an intentional one because it's also what Paran is feeling. Paran, Paran, Parangus, Parasect. But I don't know. It's compelling. I like a book that's willing to make us want something and not give it to us if it's done well, which I think it is here. But again, trust in Erickson because it's done well in the context of a larger series where this will go somewhere. It's done well in the context of I can see this as set up for something later rather than set up for the climax of this book. I'm not saying it's like narratively satisfying in the slightest to have her be one of like the mainest of main characters and a really cool person and then just be like, no more of her.
Yeah, that's basically how I feel. Okay, so this is the portion where I have to check out of this episode. However, I have faith that there will only be good takes from here on out, and nobody will say anything, like psychologically appalling. Like I like Krupp.
All right, well,
So I have faith in that.
We'll see you, Lynn. Have a great time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have sweet dreams of Krupp.
No.
No, Krupp has sweet dreams of you. That's how
Anyway,
Krupp works.
now that Lynn is gone, fuck, marry, kill. Krupp, Rallick,
Hairlock.
Hairlock.
Kill Hairlock, fuck Krupp, marry Rallick.
You know what? One thing you can know about Rallick, he will be loyal.
Yeah. That's a man's man right there. Alright,
yeah,
Krupp.
I mean,
okay.
If you marry Krupp, you have to, like, talk to him. And I don't really, not about that lifestyle.
I don't know. Look, I have said, I think, last time, that what I like about Krupp is that when you have to read him, you have to read. Like, you need to be engaged. There's a lot that, it wants you to think about. And I enjoy that. It's rewarding. And I think that, kept being the case during a lot of this. There was a chapter that I really felt like that was at a peak, and I don't remember which one it was now. But, in general, he's
Such his life.
He's one of the most fun presences in the book, I think. And I really, oh my god, how much I loved it to learn that he was the eel. It is perfect. I mean, it aligns with all the themes I was talking about of, like, power, and, like, his power is so potent because he doesn't want to get noticed. But then it's also just, I mean, look, eels are skinny. And I think Krupp enjoys that irony, and I enjoy Steven Eriksson's.
If he himself a whale, then everyone would have pegged it day one, right?
But there's plausible deniability because the eel is something that can wriggle out of being caught, and that does apply to him. I think he's great at wriggling.
I really like the tone that Krupp brings to the series because I think when we think of tone, we tend to think of it being the same thing for the entire book. And the vast majority of the point of views in this book are kind of like somber and serious.
Yeah.
Like there's some variation there. In future books, there's more variation from point of view character. But generally, like Perrin, Lorne, Toole, Whiskey Jack, most of the Drewstead folks, like they're like basically
going through it.
One. Yeah, exactly. And it's a serious book for serious people. But then Krupp is still taking everything seriously, which is why I think Krupp works. Like, he's not making a joke of what's going on. He just is inherently a goofer who is messing with people and talking in this weird way and indulging in all this stuff. But he is actually doing stuff.
It's like
I think that's what makes him interesting as a character.
He acts as the eel because he does care about, keeping Darujhistan right. And he, like, one of my, there's not much to say about him, but I just really like Circle Breaker. I just really like his vibe. He's just like, he's doing his job, he's doing the right thing, he really helps the book along, and I love that Krupp is like it's time to let this guy, get his reward. It's time to let him free because he's already done more than enough.
Put him out to pasture, but in like a positive way.
Yeah.
I think that is an important moment of like, there is one character that got everything they wanted, and it was Circle Breaker.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone else is like, somewhat dissatisfied, or they have something new, or they have to be in another book, or they got stabbed in an alley and died. And Circle Breaker just gets to go off and, do whatever he wants to do in retirement. And Krupp made that happen.
So
Circle Breaker was another one that really threw me off with, like, where are we going with this guy? Like, I didn't know throughout the book, and then the answer was like, kind of nowhere. And I was like, oh, okay.
But he is a character where I think that absolutely works and is really
I think
good.
it works in retrospect, but I definitely had to sit on it for a little
and
while.
I also
he also
like,
makes sense after you read the 10th book.
Yeah, he's ooh.
Stop saying shit like that.
It's true.
But see, the thing about Circle Breaker is I don't think it's the Circle Breaker moment I really like is when he's just talking to some guy and is like, you know what, like, you go enjoy the festival with your family, I'll take your shift at the thing. And it's like, okay, Circle Breaker's doing this on purpose to get in on the party, and he, approached this guy specifically because he knew, but he's also just doing a nice thing for this guy and is being really kind about it to his face.
Yeah, he could have like blackmailed him or broken his leg so he couldn't get to his shift or whatever. But he chooses the nice route.
Yeah,
and that's who Circle Breaker is.
But yeah, and I think his arc is generally, it's not about what he does. It's just like he is our window to understanding like the Turban Ore side of the plot, and our window to like understanding the general like identity of Darujistan's spy network stuff, and is set up for Krupp being the eel. And I think something that like I wouldn't want this with every character because it's very tricky ground to tread in terms of writing, but I like how Circle Breaker is like showing us that not everyone is someone like who necessarily has to have agency. Like, not every character we should be following should be someone who, takes these, like, even just like in general, not even at the climax, but just in general, like, does things. Like, there are people in this world whose purpose is to watch. There are people in this world who are just one small part of a machine and, get out when they can.
I will also say, I think the magic system in Malazan is like inherently fuzzy,
Yeah.
I think we talked in the last. I don't know if we actually talked about it last time, but
I think
you're pretty confident with Warrens in terms
they're
of
not
like
they're you
how they're
look
used.
you there are dimensions you can walk into to travel places, and you can kind of travel between them, but it's sort of like dangerous because you don't know what you're going to find, and then there's different energies people be warned it. And if you're connected to one, then instead of walking into it, you can also just kind of abstractly open up to it inside of you, and then you use your spells.
And
it's
like with
spell source of power.
But yeah, exactly. But like with Krupp, he's got normal magic. Like, he is a mage. Like, he does the whole like you forget to, it was Virilio or Relictom, I can't remember.
Yeah,
which also kind of a jerk move, honestly.
But it definitely was like whoa. But then it also like later was like that'll last like a day. He just needed to keep that in place, for plans to happen. I'm like, okay,
strip his personality,
because that would be messed up. But yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, Krupp has all of that power, and he'll use it for small stuff. But the thing is, like, he also then has this dream world, and you're like, is this a Warren? Is this just like what? Like, what is this?
I think the appeal, like, last time we talked a lot about characters like Krupp, and one of the things we talked about was like they're often made very sexy. Like, they're very, like, low-key and kind of stuff, and, like, Krupp is, he's perfectly round, and that's sexier than all of them, but he's I get that he's unpleasant to be around for a lot of people, and he's very rough, he's very, unfiltered. I mean, it's kind of really funny how he was dealing with Raced, but his whole thing, like, to do that, he also just fell asleep at the biggest party of the year in the city. But, so anyway, what was I saying? I think the appeal of characters like Krupp is, in some sense, that, like, because they're sort of manipulating things behind the scenes, and it seems like they're kind of seeing the patterns that no one else is seeing, it can feel like, as characters, they are almost like a window into the feeling that there's some larger pattern to the world that none of us can see, but, like, a sense of, like, is there not necessarily order behind everything, but, like, just, like, looking behind the curtain of your existence, almost. And it's a very vague and subtle feeling because, 99% of his scenes, he's just, being a human being, interacting with others. But in, like, his role in the story, he kind of implies that kind of looking behind the curtain-ness. But you never know if it's real. You never know if he really is looking behind the curtain, or if he's just, doing his best and managing and doing it confidently.
And he's not infallible. Like, there's still...
He just
like,
kind of...
that archetype, there's a danger of them
Lorne could have killed him.
Right, yeah. Like, with that archetype, there's a danger of them functionally being omnipotent, even if, like, there's, like, in the mechanic of the story, like,
Yeah.
And Krupp, knows more than a normal person is able to know. But he still gets in that situation where it's like, yeah, he was like one sword swing away from like being two perfect round balls instead of one.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that's how it goes sometimes. And I think that plays into the themes we were talking about before of like he's got all this power, and even he is still limited in a lot of ways in what he can do. But he, unlike a lot of other people, is aware of that and seems to embrace it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes him, a malicious Krupp would be the most dangerous foe of all, because you just never be able to figure the guy out.
Yeah. Like Krupp, and this is very much, me stringing together some, like, I'm not saying this makes sense or that this is what the book is trying to do or anything, but it makes me think of, like, the world itself is an unpredictable thing. Like, the Malazan side makes all these plans, they fail. So many people in the book make plans and they fail because the world is not a thing you can control. And it's almost like Krupp is like the world, which I know I sound like I'm high when I talk about that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, because he's a circle. He's round.
Yes. Well, I mean, Malazan's world is flat.
Is it?
No, I just made that up.
I don't know, maybe. It could be. Like, I got no idea. I don't even know
I
if
would
that's...
not be
I'm pretty
surprised.
sure it's round. I'm pretty sure.
I think
Probably?
Erickson.
I think so.
No, because
this was
it
confirmed.
is.
You have told me
It was confirmed.
You have told me that Erickson cared about, like, making sure that the cities actually make sense with the geography. I think that kind of, anthropologist writer would just put it on a ground planet because he cares about making it
I could also
accurately
see
make
Steve
sense.
getting in a situation where he's like, the only way out is for the Earth to be flat. He's like, fuck it, then the Earth has to be flat. That's also the kind of writer that he is. No, but I think Krupp encapsulates this book in a lot of ways. And like, one of the things that you've been spoiled on is that like
There's a
Krupp,
book that's...
there's a book that is a lot of Krupp.
and I am so looking forward to that book.
Yeah, you're gonna love it, objectively. But it sort of makes sense even coming out of this book why, like, if you were gonna pick a character for that to be the case, it would have to be Krupp, because he has the unique voice, he's an interesting person, and also he's already occupying this like weird space where he is a character in the story, but he is also, it seems, the story in a way.
Yeah, in like a very, we're stretching things there and all.
Yeah,
that.
it's loose, definitely.
Yeah.
So can we talk about the characters that we have not mentioned hardly at all?
Okay, so there
because we
are
all
actually
think they're boring.
there are some that I actually like. There's some stuff we actually missed over because there's some stuff with Paran that I wanted to bring up. Paran, Parade. There's some stuff with parents that I wanted to bring up because I really don't know what to make of it.
Yeah.
So, what's the deal with him and wolves? Like, this is another thing where
Wolves or hounds?
Wheel of Time reference?
Realm of the
hounds.
Elderlings reference. There's some stuff at the end that already stuck out to me, and then when I was taking notes, I noticed an earlier thing. So at the end, it's like Cotillion, and this is a good scene, like Cotillion tells him, next time you see the hounds run, and he's like, am I going to run from them or with them? And then it's also like, okay, now I forget what one of the earlier ones was, but there's the moment where he's, dealing with the Finest, helping the Azoth, and it's like, and it's like he acts like a hound for a moment, and I'm like, I don't get.
There's also in Dragnipper, right?
I think there's something.
Hounds of Shadow?
That's what it was. It's like they
touches the blood.
they momentarily mistake him for one of them, and it's like, why? I am so. Is this like when they were dealing with Gear and Hairlock was trying to steal Gear's soul? A little bit of it ended up in Paran. Is this Paran is just like kind of like a guy with hound energy? He's just he knows how to
He's the alpha male.
More like he's like okay.
Big hound energy.
Hounds are like
I mean, there's a reason Tattersail was interested.
Yeah,
right? Like,
look, hounds. You know what? Now I'm starting to cook because hounds, like wolves, are more of like a wild thing, but hounds are really associated with like loyalty, duty, protecting their master, and that's tied. I'm not saying Paran loves being like that, but that is tied to a lot of his themes. So anyway, my point is, does he have like some actual magic houndy thing going on with him? Or is he just kind of like a houndy guy? Like, is he like, having an insight into his true nature that he really will run with the hounds someday? Or is he just totally making this shit up in his head?
So it's because of the blood. right? Because he touches the blood of the killed
Oh.
hounds and then gets transported into Dragnipur, and
Into
that's where all the
Dragnipur.
hound stuff.
So
Which is one of
so-
the coolest scenes of the book.
Yeah,
by
oh,
the
yeah.
way.
Because he's
Which-
not
Oh my
chained.
god.
Yeah.
I don't have much to say about that. So specifically, I don't know what the hell it means that like they went deeper into the darkness. I don't know what that means their fate is. I'm not even sure what that means for Paran thematically. I think there's something to how he chose to be kind to them rather than,
Yeah.
resent them for wanting to kill him. But I don't even know if it was a real kindness. I don't know where that is going. And I'm not sure how much there is to
Yeah.
say about it because we literally don't know, or at least I don't know right now. I don't know if it's been revealed, but I don't know what happens when they go deeper.
Yeah, we can raffo. I do feel like the hounds were just kind of doing their job, though, with the whole, trying to kill Perrin thing. And I think he realized that, He was like, you were on the clock. It's whatever. Like, you had your orders from higher up.
It happens.
It's not your
Happens to the
fault.
best of us.
Yeah. And also
yeah.
they're doggies. Like, dogs are cute. I feel like that's just like that's a theme of Malazan that we really need to dive into. It's in
Yeah,
later books,
Erickson's
too.
a dog
There's a lot of
person.
cute dogs. He is a dog person.
Very clearly
There's literally
not a cat
there's
person.
one cat, and we'll talk about it when we get there.
He's
but
a dog, you know what I mean?
Ooh, can't
Anyway,
wait for the cat.
so there's a cat.
Who else is there to talk about? Baruch. Baruch, I like him.
You're
I have
literally
nothing to say about him.
You're literally not mentioning one of the biggest parts of the book because we all just find them boring.
Yeah, we'll do that later. Okay, look. Baruch is just... I think he is a fun presence. I like, his dialogue. I think it's cool, but there's just not, like... He perfectly fulfills his role, and this, like...
He's a good character.
I don't want to just describe his role. It's just like, yeah, he does that. He is what he
R.I.P.
does.
Mammoth. You hate
Yeah,
to see
R.I.P.
it.
Mammoth. It's really funny how, like, Deruden is not in the book at all, and then out of nowhere, it's just like, you know what? Here's Deruden. She's got big boobs. I think it says that. She's cool. Like, Baruch likes her.
I literally don't know who that is at all.
She's another member of the Cabal, and...
She shows up when there's also a Tystan the Assassin, I believe. There's, like, a whole situation that's going down.
And, like, she and Baruch are together trying to deal with Vorkin, and I think she lives because Baruch is the only one who has the antidote to the poison that Vorkin used on her, which is cool.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like you would have it's like she is there for, like, the culmination of, like, everyone has the thing they do in the finale, except she wasn't actually in the book before it. So, who else is there?
And also, like, half the people don't have a thing they do in the finale.
Yeah, so, Talk the Younger seems to die. I'm sure that'll last.
Yeah. If there's one thing we know about Malazan, it's that when people die, they die.
Yeah.
Well, he gets yeeted into chaos, and it's like, okay, Steve. You're putting him on ice.
A lot of the bridge burners did not really stand out, but I do quite like how they played cards with a deck of dragons. That was very funny.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who read this book, and their top 3 characters are Whiskey Jack, Quick Ben, and Kalam. Like, that's the level of love that the bridge burners get. And I think they're okay. They're whatever. I think they get better in future books.
So what
I liked Quick Ben and Kalam in this book.
What I figured out about Whiskey Jack is that he is the ultimate extreme of, like, I'm sure he has things going on. I mean, he has things going on. He was a former general who was sort of, like, demoted on all of this, and he's just trying his hardest to do right by the few men he still has. And it's like, I was, like, critical of Lorne because I really wanted to understand why she didn't work for me. But, like, Lorne absolutely should have been in the book. It's not a question. Like, Lorne had to be the character doing the things she did, and it's interesting because she was. I genuinely believe you could take Whiskey Jack out of this book and not much would change, because nothing that's happening needs Whiskey Jack to be Whiskey Jack.
Real.
There just has to be someone who's in charge and calling the shots in terms of what the bridge burners are doing for their missions. But if Whiskey Jack got killed early in the book and Kalam was like, I'm taking charge now, it'd be the same thing.
So real.
And, like, I'm not saying Whiskey Jack is even a bad character. Like, you could literally just do interesting things with him in another book, but, like, this book didn't do things with him.
I think the thing you described about Lorne of, like, taking characters and putting them in situations that their character isn't, like, mostly suited for, I think that most applies to Whiskey Jack.
Oh, yeah. And, like,
This is not a book that is built for a character like Whiskey
I
Jack.
use Quick Ben as an example because I think he's a simple and extreme one, but he's also the example of, like, that working. And he's also a good example because he has one little part in the book that's really about him.
Yeah, where you
Whereas-
really get to see
Yeah.
what he can do.
Yeah.
And I also think that Whiskey Jack suffers from a lot of the things that he's thinking are also in redundancy with Lorne. And thematic redundancy isn't the end of the world. Like, it's good to build stuff up. And there are differences. But it does feel like, all right, if I want the introspective soldier who's part of the Empire but doesn't really, like, fully buy into it and is worried about the morality of their actions, like, I think Lorne's a little bit more interested.
A lot more.
I will say, I do like the moment when their entire plan is to bomb a couple hundred civilians, as you do. And then they realize that it's the city of blue fire and there's gas lines everywhere. And they're like, holy fuck, we're going to blow up the entire city. And that's a little bit too much.
Yeah.
For them,
So I'm going to be honest,
I
I do find that anticlimactic. I don't really love that. I don't know. It's a little just like they just like, oh, actually we have to not do that. I feel like the problem is less that twist and more just that I'm not invested enough in the bridge burners to be invested in them, like, realizing they made a mistake. So I also want to mention a very minor character, but one I liked, Fingers, the guy who shows up to help Crocus not die. I bring him up mainly because I think in his very brief section he already had more personality than any of the bridge burners.
He's part of the Crimson Guard, right?
Yep.
So it's Fingers and Blues is the other
I think
one?
so, yeah. And he just already, like,
Blues
I like
is the one that fights
Blues is
Lorne. And
Yeah.
Yep.
Fingers is like talking to Crocus.
Oh,
while that
Blues,
happens.
am I right? Have beef. I didn't even remember Fingers.
Is Blues blue? I can't remember. Let me look up.
Could be. I mean, then again,
Blues
he's
Is he napping? No, I don't think
he's
so.
in the Crimson Guards.
Yes,
That'd be pretty
yes.
ironic.
Yes, he's napping.
Oh, that's kind of racist. But okay.
Look, mercenary,
Imagine
mercenary,
you join the military and
know,
they're like, "What's up, Whitey? That's your name now."
that's
Sorry.
So, who else? Mies and Arilta, minor characters, but they're based.
Yeah. I like
Crone,
him.
I know, Eve, you love Crone. I'm just
I
like,
do love Crone is so fucking funny. Like, there are a couple moments in Malazan, like, that I actually laugh out loud, and Crone is like half of them. Like, I just think she's hilarious. Like, I want to be her friend.
I didn't get
Crone
that this
is
book.
in the Dream Blunt rotation.
I could totally see her,
please.
reaching that in the next books. Just wasn't there yet for me, but that's
Crone
She's just
does
so
have
whimsical.
one of the best
She's so
moments
silly. She's so silly.
Yeah.
No, I have no critiques, just I didn't vibe yet.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
I'm not sure how to really talk about Cotillion exactly, but I did like the
And
scene.
Lynn's not here, so I don't think we can talk about him.
Yeah, because Lynn is like a diehard for Cotillion.
He's
But I don't know,
like the number one Cotillion stan.
his scene with Paran near the end was pretty good.
Yeah.
I think there's
Like
some
him.
things you need a little bit more information about Cotillion and Abanas.
Yeah,
to
I mean these are
really figure out
characters.
what they're doing.
These are also characters where, like, I'm not even gonna say it's like characters who are interesting, but they're not in a plot that brings things out of them, because this is more of just like a clear setup thing, Like, it is deliberately a mystery that we don't know what their goal is, or like why
They're not
they
going all out.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
like,
Erickson's holding them back for later.
and that's very clear. That's not, it's confusing. Ooh, you know what I forgot to mention? My other favorite moment in the book is Krupp just, pulling Raced into his dream and just literally being like, nah, you're not gonna do all that shit you're trying to do. Like, no.
no, that doesn't fly here. Sorry, guy. I like Krull just because he's weird, but he's not. He's like this elder god, whatever that means. He's got like all of this like clout. It seems his followers have died out or whatever, but he's not really like malicious. He's just kind of hanging out. He doesn't really seem bitter about it. You know, he's like, sometimes everyone forgets you are. It happens, and I think that's it was not what I was expecting in terms of, forgotten gods brought back because of a blood sacrifice. You're expecting something a little bit more, genocide-y, maybe like race.
So
But
one
Carol
thing
just seems like kind of happy to be there.
So I was confused by something because it seems like Carol, which I say Carol because it has an apostrophe and I think it sounds cool, but I think that Raced is like, Carol, you're here, didn't you already die? But then Carol also, like, there's a temple to him, so the humans know about him, and so I'm not I don't think I understand how the timeline works on that.
I think gods and the relationship between their worshippers mean that gods themselves can sort of wax and wane, I think is a way to think about it. And so, like, the fact that he is brought back by this blood sort of implies that there was a form of death, but it's like, oh, I thought you were on your way out because, at some point you lost.
Well, I guess it sort of, like,
champions or
implies that
whatever.
he's kind of gone in and out, because, like, he'd have to be gone in a way that Raced was aware of, and then back at a time when humans can build a temple to him, and then gone again.
And there's also an element of race could have just been wrong. Like, it happens.
Yeah.
Maybe Kroll was like, all right, I'm leaving. I'm going to go do something else. And Race was like, all right, well, Kroll's dead.
Yeah. So, are there any other... I feel like there's probably, like, a character or two that we're not talking about. Probably no one that important. You know what's... We alluded to it, but we didn't say much about it, but I do really like the scene where Perrin and Cole make friends. It really is just, like, a satisfying kind of, like, you know what? These guys,
that was a nice...
they get each other.
It's also
they
one of the
vibed.
first... It's one of the first real convergences between the Malazan side and the Druidistan side.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that it happens, and it's like, yeah, they're on both sides of this war, and they're, like, pretty similar, all things considered. Like, Perrin and Cole have more in common than, like, Cole and Absalar.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way that these things sort of break down.
So, anyone else? Anyone else? I mean, there's, like, minor figure... I mean, we could have a conversation about Turban, or if we want, we could have a conversation about, like...
Him dying was funny.
We could have could talk about... I mean, we already basically did talk about Chalice. Some of
I think...
Like Surat, we could talk about, like, no, I think we covered every...
I think we covered it.
We covered every character that needs addressing. I don't think there's much left for us to really talk about then in this podcast, other than my predictions or expectations for the next one.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, good luck.
So I basically know from, like, the spoilers that... Is anyone gonna be listening to this podcast sort of, like, alongside their read-through? Probably not, like, immediately, but if this podcast gets anywhere...
I think maybe.
Like, there's a chance. So I will say I have, like, loose spoilers of what Deadhouse Gates is generally about, and I'm not going to say all of them, but I'm going to talk about a couple. And so if you, like, want to, go into your own Deadhouse Gates read blind, then stop listening here. But, so I know that we're going to another continent. I'm pretty sure that's going to be 7 cities. I'm pretty sure there's going to be, like, a 7 cities... I mean, this book already said, like, 7 cities is days away from revolting, so that sounds exciting. And I'm pretty sure Felison is going to be pretty involved as a character. I know that my fellows in the call here are big Felison fans, so it'll be interesting to see if I am. But,
You can't see the face I'm making, but I'm so normal about her. Don't even worry about it.
But yeah, should be interesting. But yeah, I'm mostly just expecting something that kind of jumps. I mean, I'm expecting something different.
You're going to be so normal about Felison like Eve is. It's crazy.
We'll see. And I know a few other, like, spoilers, but I don't need to just... honestly, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I need to know every single spoiler that Werb knows so I understand exactly how blind it is, I'm sorry. I don't care. I don't know anything important. I don't know anything important.
You're not spoiled on anything that, like, really
I do not know anything that... I don't know where the plot goes. I know, like, elements that might appear. But, yeah. I will say I'm excited for it. Those in this call are definitely telling me I should be excited for it. I've heard it's a better book than the one I just read, and
it's true.
If Gardens of the Moon is like a 7, Deadhouse Gates is like a 9.
But I think Gardens of the Moon is like an 8, and, by the law of averages, that means Deadhouse Gates is going to be a 4.
Yep.
I thought Gardens was a 4, and then Deadhouse Gates was like an 8. So,
dang.
We'll see.
I can't believe you kept reading.
Shout out to Deadhouse Gates making me cry at the Eras tour.
No, you don't understand. We were like a chapter away from Eve being like, no, I'm done.
I was so close to just giving up, and then I was like, oh, wait a second.
I mean, I'm surprised you kept going after Gardens of the Moon if you just
I
didn't
am a
like
stubborn bitch.
Yeah, but
okay?
I know, but...
First of all, I trust Duck. Second of all, I was like, this series makes me feel stupid. And I don't like feeling stupid. And that makes me angry. So I'm going to keep fucking reading this series until I either give up,
reading is a hell of a
which I don't do, or till I feel less stupid.
You know what? That is energy I agree with.
Yeah, and guess what? It worked.
Book call me a bitch? What?
It
I
did.
think this book called me a little bitch.
Yeah.
I'm not
You
gonna
go
let that
beat the
stand.
book up in a Denny's parking lot.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, but
Assert dominance. It's just
so-
a book. It's just words.
yeah,
What the fuck are you gonna
you
do to
could
me?
set that on fire. You could, get a
Well,
Yeah, I could
scissors.
throw it off the roof.
You got scissors. Everyone has scissors in their house.
make you
I did
cry
almost
repeatedly
throw
is what
one
the
of
words
the
can do,
books
right?
off the roof. It's true.
Wait, which one?
Midnight Tides. You were on the phone with
wait,
me.
yeah. No,
Anyway,
funny. I'm just not ending pilled. It's not my fault.
yeah, so, in conclusion, good book, one of the better epic fantasies I've read, and if this is just the beginning, then we are in for a bumpy ride.